All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is January 15th, 2026. Thank you so much for joining me, folks, to discover the truth beneath the surface. As always, I really do appreciate everybody out there taking the time to listen. And tonight, once again, I have the honor of welcoming my good friend and national leader, Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bossi of Australia One, back to the show. This is a man who certainly needs no introduction to this audience. We've been working together now for probably well over a year doing shows together, and it is always a pleasure to welcome you back, my good friend, and to get your perspective on everything that's been happening. It was a couple of months ago, I believe, we last sat down for a conversation, and certainly a lot has transpired since then. So I am very much looking forward to getting your take on all the hot button issues. How you doing tonight, Rick?
Absolutely outstanding. Thanks, Patriot. Great to be here. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 2026. It's going to be an amazing year.
Amen to that, my friend. Absolutely. And every time we sit down and we exchange ideas, the audience really loves it. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of ground for us to cover tonight. We're going to examine where we are in the overall trajectory of the operation, as my audience is accustomed to hearing me say. And I think that everybody out there would agree with you that 2026 is not only going to be an amazing year, but it's been off to a pretty epic start. We've got the stage set very well. The optics are all serving a specific purpose, as we're going to discuss in multiple different contexts tonight throughout the course of the show. But the big picture here is that Trump and the White Hats, at least in my opinion, the Trump and the White Hats are rolling out the destruction of the New World Order to the public. The drip, drip, drip is very rapidly accelerating toward the flood that we're all anticipating and have been for quite some time now. Everything that occurred behind the scenes during Trump's first term and throughout the fake Biden years, particularly after what I believe was the invocation of the Insurrection Act back on January 6th of 2021, that fateful day when the White Hats took complete control of DC and the scripted movie really kicked into high gear. And I think what's happening now is all of this is being gradually and systematically revealed to the public. And what we have, in my opinion, is a very clearly scripted insurrection going on in Minneapolis, brought to us, of course, by White Hat Production. So I thought that we could begin there tonight, and I'll just kind of lay it out before I pass the mic over to you and have you give us your take on everything that's been going on. But today it was reported that federal agents allegedly left a pile of arrest warrants and sensitive information, intel, behind on the street. There were also reports of a stolen cache of weapons. And we had Tim Walz just the other day saying that ICE agents are going door to door, ordering people to point out where their neighbors of color live. We've got Mayor Jacob Frey saying that residents are urging police to take up arms and fight against ICE in the streets. And then we also saw Tim Walz make a direct appeal to the White House today to, quote unquote, stop this campaign of retribution. And it was beautiful because the Trump administration basically told them to go screw. And we've been informed. I mean, I could pull up the quote, but that was pretty much the essence of it. Meanwhile, we've been informed that the Pentagon is working to surge dozens, and this is really interesting, working to surge dozens of military lawyers, JAGs, to Minneapolis to assist in federal prosecutions amid an immigration enforcement crackdown. And this is according to officials that are familiar with the matter. I'm reading a quote here that was released today in a statement. It also revealed that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has directed the military to identify 40 judge advocate general officers that are going to serve as special assistants to the U.S. attorneys in Minneapolis. And then, of course, we had this from our great president, Donald J. Trump. This was essentially what everybody was talking about this morning when he posted it. Let me go ahead and pull this up here. I got a number of screens up as per usual. But this was the truth that DJT put out just today. If the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE, who are only trying to do their job, I will institute, drum roll please, the Insurrection Act, which many presidents have done before me, and quickly put an end to the travesty that is taking place in that once great state. And he signed off, as is his custom. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT. So I think you would agree with me, Rick, that we are seeing things heat up pretty dramatically. So why don't we begin there? Why don't you give us your take on everything that we've seen happen in Minneapolis? Of course, starting with the, well, really going back in time, it actually started in the beginning of January of 2025, beginning of last year, with all of the DOJ revelations. And then gradually it's been growing and growing. And we had that viral video that was put out by Nick Shirley exposing the Somali daycare fraud. And now, of course, we've got, then of course we had the shooting of Renee Good that has sparked this situation over there. So I'm curious to get your take on what's happening in Minneapolis. It looks as if it could be ground zero for this, for the insurrection, not unlike what we saw back in 2020 during the Summer of Love. As a matter of fact, I found it absolutely fascinating that where Renee Good was shot is exactly a 17-minute walk from where George Floyd and that whole event played out. Repeats are necessary. So why don't you give us your take on that?
Sure. You framed it very well, Patriot, because what you're saying is the, as you said, the drip, 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 turning into a trickle, turning into a flood. But it has to be done in such a way that it doesn't cause a shock to the target audience. And so what DJT has done, he's telegraphed intentions, but making sure there's sufficient what they call social proof beforehand. So the first time you'll hear a message, it'll have nowhere in your mind to sit comfortably. You've got to create a new little box in your head and say, oh, this fits there. Well, that was done with the alleged January 6th insurrection. So all of a sudden, the other guys did it first. Oh, we know about insurrections. So, oh, we've got a picture in our head, chaos, bad people doing bad things. And so now by using that word quite intentionally, oh, well, we better, whip out the old Insurrection Act, and it's not the first time. And so in the psychology and in the memory of he's right, this has happened before. Yeah, we understand it. So there isn't the shock of the new. And that's critical in terms of communicating any message. The shock of the new is always hard. Change management, that's why there's such a big business in change management. And this is a massive change management operation that is being run. They have to initially paint the picture for the organization. It doesn't matter whether you're a corner store, getting a new brand or new staff, or whether it's the United States saving the planet. The first step is for people to realize the current situation and realize that it's been done before, and what we're recommending is going to work. We have to understand that that's going to happen. And then we prepare ourselves, we celebrate the past and prepare to embrace the new, because where we are is no longer tenable and we have to move out of it. And so behind the scenes, what people have been experiencing has been this change management process, which is well understood. And so when you look at it through that prism, the drip becomes a trickle, becomes a flood. Terms are used for the second, third, and fourth time, initially by the other side. So again, it's not DJT doing new things, it's the other side did new things, and he's just following suit. So follow the leader is a very comfortable place for people to watch. And then the next part is, of course, the fact that this is it's a combination of what the black hats have intended and have done. Now, we know that there's a degree of control by white hats, but there's still the remnants of the black hats, and they're still doing bad things. And these events go back years. It's not like in the last couple of minutes, the leering centers have been established. Well, we've got the DOJ events from last year, which revealed massive fraud. So the idea of the Somalis, excuse me, executing similar levels of fraud is not new. They go, oh, here we go again. So they're all accustomed to it. So they can accept it as a possibility much more easily. And so there's this whole process of waking the people up. It is ground zero. It's a great place to start. I mean, from the governor down, that poor beleaguered state needs a wire brush and a bottle of antiseptic to clean it out. And this is a great place to start. So if you go back to Walz's Walz's role as vice president to Kamala Harris, where he was elevated to national status. So once again, very intelligently putting the actors in place. So the name Tim Walz brings with it a whole bunch of filth in the minds of the average person, because, and this is not a criticism. I mean, life's busy. You get distracted and you can't keep bringing new characters into the show. And so you can see what they've done is they've brought the show, they introduced the characters in the first episode, the second episode. Now we're coming towards the last episode. I remember that guy. That guy's actually, he's got some problems. I don't like him much. I understand exactly what they're doing. So it's a very sophisticated exposition of what's going on and what has to happen. And so this is now where the battle takes place. But the audience, the target audience, has already picked a side. They really have. They can see it and go, oh, I know which side I'm on. They're the good guys and the bad guys. And then you have events like the killing of the lesbian whose partner used to beat up her children and put cigarettes out on their arms. And it's hard to feel sorry for the woman who deserved what she got from one perspective. That's certainly my perspective. If in fact it really happens, because we don't know, but as it's shown. And then the backstory comes out instantaneously that
Funny how that happens,
she abandoned her. Yeah, it's so quick. She abandoned her children bar one to go with her lesbian lover, who beat up on the children and put cigarettes on her arm. So once again, the storyline is just the script writers are excellent. They're dropping. There's not a quiet moment in this show. And so it just adds to the story that, okay, well, look, maybe she didn't deserve, but she was a piece of crap. So I have no emotional connection to this woman. And then the evidence will come out later. Oh, she did the wrong thing. And well, it's unfortunate, but away you go. And even the White House press secretary got stuck into a reporter today in the last couple of days. I don't know when, but he asked a very loaded question, admitted that he thought that ICE were criminals, and she just laid into him. So you've got multiple supports coming into the theme, which is being pushed forward by the White House narrative. Sorry, the White Hat narrative. and the people are easily accepting it. It makes sense. Yeah, this makes sense. And your last point about the the JAG officers being appointed, as if you can just pluck 40 JAG lawyers out of your back pocket because this, the Pentagon's got them sitting around doing nothing, waiting for such a no. This all takes time. It's been prepared. They're locked and loaded. Go. Enter stage left, and they turn up on the stage, and the audience isn't left waiting, as is normally the case with justice of any nature. You wait 3 months, you forgot what the charge was, and you've got no interest in it, and I don't care anymore anyway. And so you can see the speed with which all of these things are rolling out. It's a very sophisticated plan, necessary, because our adversaries have been running exactly the same program, but against us. And now we are the beneficiaries of that same process to which we have become accustomed over the years. The instant meeting of gratification that'll come with a 56-minute commercial hour of special victims unit or some sort of police show. We've been trained to expect the answer immediately, which in real life never happens. But that's it. And so this is the Schwerpunkt. This is the critical moment. This is ground zero. So people can see, okay, that makes sense in Minnesota. Hey, guess what? The next state might have the same problem. We might need to put the same solution in. And so there's an acceptance by the people, which, and this is the real part of it, which is lawful and legal and correct. So this isn't an ambit power grab by the president. At no point has DJT taken any action that has not been absolutely legal and lawful, even the ones that seem a bit weird. But at no point has he done anything contrary to a set of rules, and the people can take great peace in that. This is the first one, and it's going to flow onto other areas as they need to do it.
No doubt about it. Everything needs to be done exactly by the book. The Q drops made that very clear. And Trump has been executing his duties faithfully and lawfully this entire time. And what part of the show that's going on right now is revealing that to the public and using, of course, the mainstream media, which I happen to believe is under the control of the military, in order to put out narratives that are so easily debunked that it just compounds the lack of trust. I mean, I can't even imagine that there are still people out there who are watching mainstream media and believing what they're seeing at this point. I have to put those individuals in the category of the 4 to 6% who are just going to be lost forever. But one thing that I think is important to point out is that 4 to 6% doesn't sound like a big number. But when you're talking about a population of over 300 million people, that's a sizable number there of individuals. And I do believe that a lot of what we're seeing manifesting in Minneapolis and in other areas, and I totally agree that this is going to spread, I anticipate, relatively rapidly as the weeks turn into months and we get deeper into 2026. We're going to see this fraud that looks, I mean, it's bad enough in Minnesota. It's to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, but in comparison to other states, particularly places like California, which I happen to believe is probably going to be next on the agenda in terms of the exposure operation, it's going to make what's going on in Minneapolis look like pocket change in comparison. And you've got these individuals like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you've got a number of other high-profile individuals who are essentially putting out the narrative that, why should we even pay our taxes at this point? You hear more and more people engaging in that conversation. I mean, and it's looking as if we are, and we're going to segue, I think, a little bit later into the show in terms of into the financial theater of the war, but it looks as if all of this is being presented to the people in a systematic way, so that ultimately, when we get to the scene in the movie where the IRS and the Federal Reserve, of course, we've got the whole situation going on with Jerome Powell, which we can talk about a little bit as well. It's going to make it a lot easier to unravel this complex web of fraud, because the people are being exposed to it more and more on a daily basis. And it seems like we're kind of at an inflection point. And that's the way that I like to look at it at this stage of the game. It doesn't seem like there's a lot more real estate for the remnants of the enemy. And I agree with you. I've talked about this before, that you and I have had discussions in the past about the way that this operation's been carried out in terms of taking out the top tier and then the middle tier, and then gradually working their way down. But of course, the optics are exactly the opposite in terms of how they're presenting all of this to the public. But it doesn't seem as if there's going to be a lot more opportunity for them to continue to cling to power, given how rapidly all of this is playing out. And I would also add to that, I know I'm kind of adding on a number of different elements to this specific segment here, but we've also got the RICO grand conspiracy case, which is, it's actually, it's going operational now. We've got a grand jury that's been impaneled in Florida. Q told us that the Democrat Party is going to cease to exist once it's all exposed. We're anticipating that, and Trump has signaled this many times. He's talked about RICO. So it's very exciting to see where we're at right now.
Yeah, the RICO is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. Even here in Australia, because a lot of people don't think they're subject to it, but they're in for a very rude shock, because the RICO, as you know, and for those that aren't familiar with it, please look it up, RICO, the RICO statutes, initially designed to corral mafia, but a criminal organization, which is what it's designed to capture. A criminal organization can be described in any way, shape, or form. The Freemasons are subject to RICO. And they're saying, but no, we're not. Yes, you are. So that's the way RICO works. So please, have a look at that. And certainly here in Oz, we expect it to hammer down as well. And they're going to be in a world of hurt, because they've spent their lifetime doing bad things, and even unknowingly, but being part of the organization, and everything they've made, the proceeds of crime, it would not be inappropriate for the proceeds of crime. That's your house, your beach house, your ski lodge, whatever the hell you've managed to squirrel away over the years, because, money was your God. That'll be gone. sorry, folks, it's not like you and the kids can wander off and enjoy your ill-gotten gains. They will be gone, and you'll be on the bones of your backside, like the rest of us have been, and you'll have to start from scratch. That's if you're lucky enough not to be executed. That's if you're lucky enough not to be jailed. So you know you're going to find a whole new value set after this happens. You'll just be happy to be alive when you see all those above you, the ones that knowingly committed crimes, being charged, tried, found guilty, and either executed or imprisoned for very, very long sentences. So it's going to be a really interesting time.
No question. Absolutely no question about it. The entire Democrat Party is a criminal organization. And we know it's not just the Democrats. We know it's the entire political spectrum, essentially. And I do believe that eventually that's going to come a little bit further down the pike. But the way I see it right now is that the optics that are being presented to the public are that we still have they're propping up the illusion of the two-party system, Democrat and Republican. But we know eventually that's going to get unraveled as well. It seems like Trump and the White Hats are putting out this narrative to essentially show the public that the entire Democrat Party is, in fact, a criminal organization. They're going to use the RICO statutes as well, but then eventually it's going to spread. And that's where it's going to get really interesting, because you'll recall that it was only a few weeks ago that Trump said in an interview that the election was stolen. We all know that, but he said that over the next couple of months, all of it's going to come out. And this was just before the raid in Venezuela. Now, the timing of it was absolutely amazing. So, once that comes out, once the stolen election comes out, and you and I were talking about this a little bit backstage, and they reveal all of this to the public, it's not just the fact that they stole the presidential election. They're going to go back to 2020 and basically revisit the results of every single individual who's currently sitting in Congress. And that could provide a path to a fascinating set of circumstances in terms of Trump's comment that he made just today, saying that, I don't really think we need midterm elections. That was a huge tell. What was your response to that?
Oh, I think that's fantastic. Once again, DJT only telegraphs that which he needs to telegraph, meaning that something is coming, and it gives people time to analyze and look at what is said. But just before I talk about that, in terms of Venezuela and election fraud, we know that the code for the Smartmatics was written in Venezuela, was then used to defraud the US elections. But it exceeds that. It's global elections. The elections all around the planet have been stolen. That includes little old Australia, little old me, in a number of elections that we've had. And in one election, we've contested 6 state and federal elections over the last, 7, 8 years. But what's interesting, in the booth in which I voted, my wife voted, my son, who's of voting age, voted, another candidate voted, and we had massive support in my local area. The official results had me receiving 0 votes in that booth.
Really?
And so we collected prima facie. Yeah, there you go. I couldn't even vote for myself. That's how bad a candidate I was. Anyway, so we know that globally, this vote fraud, and this is why it's important. DJT keeps pressing the vote fraud in the United States, but wait till it spills out, and then people around the planet find out that they haven't had a free and fair election for the longest time. But anyway, that's that one. Now, talking about DJT saying we might not need midterms, and people are now screaming and tearing their party dresses, saying, well, you can't do that. He's a fascist. He's a dictator. No, he's not. It's completely lawful. There are systems. There are checks and balances in place. The Congress has to make a decision. The judiciary has to play its role. It's part of the checks and balances that your founding fathers put in. But he's put it out there, and people will do the research, and people like you and I will say, no, it's quite okay. Yes, there are checks, but it's lawful. And then the target audience, I mean, your audience is intelligent and well informed, but the average people out there will hear that, oh no, it's okay, you can do it, and he'll say, oh, okay, great. What are the circumstances? Well, if there's a sort of some for safety issue, whether it's the integrity of the election itself, or whether there's a natural disaster, or if there's a war. But didn't they have the elections during the Civil War? Yes, but that was different, and each situation is assessed on its own merits. Oh, okay, no problem, good. And so, do you need the midterms? No. Why is that? Well, there'll be a good reason shortly, when everybody who was elected is found to be in breach of the Constitution. And oh my God, what do you do? Well, we can't have another election because these people were never lawfully elected. Again, just like Australia, where our entire Parliament, Senate and House of Reps, like yours, are entirely fraudulent. They have taken the wrong oath to the wrong organisation, operating under unconstitutional laws, not following our formal constitution. They made up their own. And so they have no authority, they have no standing. And so when all of these people come down and then an alternative has to be created, well, we can rely upon whatever system is in place, because once again, your founding fathers were very clever in the structure of your constitution to ensure that continuity of government can occur. There is not a gap in terms of governance and leadership, but it's got to be lawful and it's in place. And when that rolls out, whatever form it takes, then so be it, and the country will be fine. So if DJT has said it, you can bet that something exciting is in the offing.
Yeah, well, so many people have been coming into this year with this attitude of we've got to get all this stuff done, and we've got to get everything sorted out before the midterms, because and even Trump has contributed to this narrative as well, saying that that they're going to impeach him, and he's been talking a lot about the filibuster, and we've got to get rid of the filibuster so we can implement the agenda and we can move forward with everything that we want to do. But the reality of the matter is that Q told us all the way back in 2017, elections at this point no longer matter. So we know that we're under continuity of government now. Certainly none of us want to see the operation go beyond the midterms, but the reality is that no matter how they choose to play this out, the military is in full control. Now, if we can get into speculation mode a little bit here. I mean, we've already talked about the Insurrection Act. It looks as if we're on the cusp of that happening. And I'm not saying it's going to happen today or tomorrow or next week, but I can anticipate that over the next several weeks, as the tension continues to build, as the rioting continues to spread to other cities, ICE mobilizes into various different locations. We see all of the blue state, quote unquote, leadership doubling down on their obstructionist policies, engaging in outright insurrection, that we're going to see Trump actually pull that trigger. Now, again, I believe that trigger was pulled back in January of 2021. But the reality of the matter is that there's a very small group of us, even inside of the truther community, that believe that Trump actually invoked the Insurrection Act already. But I think it's consistent with just about everything else that we've talked about over the years, is that what we're seeing play out now is essentially a replay of events that have already taken place behind the scenes. So I could very easily envision a scenario where, and I don't know exactly what the sequence is going to be or the timing, nobody does, but we've got the Insurrection Act. We're right on the cusp of that right now. I mentioned what Trump had indicated about the stolen election of 2020 coming out. So you've got those two things. And you've also got the broader geopolitical picture, which we're going to get into in just a moment. But it seems to me very likely that that we could be in the eye of the storm within the next couple of months. And as we get closer to the midterms, who knows on what the circumstances are going to look like at that point. But I could see a scenario where you have emergency elections because all of these people are illegitimate. And how are they going to safeguard that optically for the public? We know that the White Hats are in control of the voting software and all the apparatus that would go into determining the election at this point. But for the public, for the general public, I could see a situation where you've got overt military intervention being triggered by the Insurrection Act, then spilling into an emergency election where we have the military at the polling booths.
Yeah, it's and once again, what they're doing very cleverly is they're getting people used to the idea that there might not be elections. Now, at first blush, that would cause, again, people to run around with their hair on fire, screaming all sorts of accusations. But the first time they face it and they realize there is a lawful statute underpinning these actions, they go, okay, that's all right then. Well, eventually we have to have elections, but yeah, we understand we are in an in extremis situation, and so we need to take these steps. Now, there's a larger step, because once that happens the first time, and as you and I were talking before the show, and I've been very blunt with the Australian people in relation to this matter, it might be some time before elections are held in other countries. It's not just the US. The US is that first, the first ones through the door. You get the bloody nose, but after the first one goes through, the rest follow. They can get through with much less drama. Now, for example, in Australia, even if we wanted to, and I spent my last green room on Wednesday, a few days ago, going through chapter and verse on the benefits of a constitutional republic, because we have a constitutional monarchy, but we don't, because the politicians have cheated us out of our constitution. They have lied. They have introduced their own legal fiction called the Queen of Australia and all sorts of nonsense. So I went through chapter and verse of the benefits of a constitutional republic. You know, what problem does it actually solve? What benefits are there to the people? Who are the losers? The globalists. And I went through in quite some detail in order to continue this forward-thinking perspective that we have, because we have to remedy this situation sometime in the future. Now, when is that going to occur? Now, I've been very blunt, and other countries can have to face this themselves. But if we removed all the criminal polity, judiciary, bureaucracy, military, constabulary, media, academia, big business, big unions, every church, synagogue, mosque, lodge, and temple, if we took out the criminal leadership of every organ of state, the intelligence services, you name it, and handed the country back to Australians, we would be physically incapable of governing ourselves, because the only people with the skill sets are the dishonest, baby raping goat jockeys from the Masons and the daughters or the harlots of the Eastern Star, and you pick your secret society. So even with the best will in the world, and not that the US would do this, but if they said, here we go, your country, you can have your country back, we're leaving, see you later, thanks for your time, we would collapse within a matter of weeks, because we just can't do it. What does that mean? It means that this period between where we are today and our first free and fair elections, where we can begin to start taking control of our country, is more than a few months and even more than a few years away. Now, this shouldn't come as a shock to Australians, because I've said this many, many times. It's just a statement of fact. It is as simple as that. It is just a statement of fact, as unpleasant as it might sound. And the truth of the matter is that who's going to do it? Who has the skill? I mean, we have an entire population that can't write a budget, doesn't know how to read a balance sheet, can't write a strategic plan. And you want to run a modern 21st century nation, state? You really? Oh, please. It's laughable, tragic, but laughable. And don't get me wrong, I'm laughing, but I don't find it funny. I find it galling that here we are, incapable of governing ourselves. And so there will be this period. And so what's happening in the US, just to bring it back to your point, the midterms, that's a bigger con than people understand. It certainly applies to Oz. And if I looked at the other countries around the planet, I'm guessing there's going to be something similar, where you're going to have to trust the people who have risked life and limb, they've spilled blood and treasure. It's the US and this alliance of nations around the world to look after your best interest. Now, the safety net under all of this is that Donald John Trump has consistently said he wants the US to be for the US. He wants Australia to be for Australia. He wants Lithuania to be for the Lithuanians. He wants France to be for the French. He wants the Emirates to be for the Emiratis. Fill in the blank. He's not interested in becoming king of the world. But there will be a period, and the world should be prepared for this. And don't shoot me. I'm just the piano player, okay? Be prepared for a period of time longer than you would like, where systems have to be cleaned out, sanitized, and rebuilt. Mm-hmm. And then the people have to be trained, educated, in what it means to have an active role in the governance of your country. Because if anything like Australia, and when we've been allowed to lull into this soporific state of affairs, where as long as the beer is cold and the barbecue is hot and the football is exciting, we'll just leave it to somebody else to sort out. Well, those days are done. And that's why we spent so much time in Australia, educating our people, getting them ready for the reality of governance, the reality of running a county, the reality of running a state, the reality of running a nation state, and then eventually learning how to integrate our activities into the community of nations across the planet. This is big. It's bigger than everyone can imagine, but it's just, again, so that small thing about do we need midterms? The implications are quite significant. So buckle up, kids. We're going to have an interesting ride.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw this, but this was also a very interesting comm as well. Let me see if I can get it on here. You see this one? The White House whole milk is back. All right. And so at first people are looking at this going, well, what's going on over here? But then if you look up in the corner, it says 45, 46, 47, and 48. You see that? And I'll give a hat tip to my friend DC Lidstone. He picked up on that one. But yeah, so they're sending very, very clear messages at this point. But one of the things that you just referenced has been something that I've thought about for a while. You know, once we get to the point, and we already know that we're under continuity of government covertly. The Insurrection Act, if you go and look at the letter of the law, it's very easy to verify that it doesn't have to be publicly announced to the people. Like the president doesn't have to come out and say, my fellow Americans, the storm is upon us. We are under the Insurrection Act. I mean, we're all anticipating that famous tweet, of course, but the reality of the matter is that the president only has to address the nation, which he did, by the way, on January 6th, telling everybody to disperse, telling the crowds to disperse, telling them to go home in peace. But that really is the requirement, the bare minimum requirement for the Insurrection Act. So we know, at least we suspect. I'm very, very firmly grounded in that opinion that we've not only been under continuity of government, but more specifically, the Insurrection Act was declared in the aftermath of the stolen election. But having said that, like I mentioned before, most of the public has absolutely no idea. And so once the military intervention becomes overt, once the Insurrection Act is declared, and we're in a place, and along with that, that's why I coupled it with the revelations about the stolen election, not just for the president, but for all the down ballots. Everybody in Congress essentially is going to be proven. Maybe not everybody, but a vast majority are going to be proven to have been fraudulently elected. That puts us in a very interesting, unprecedented place. And the question really then becomes, well, and this is related to what you were just saying in terms of, well, who's going to govern the country? So how long is that overt military intervention presence going to be in place? And I wondered about that. Do they have people waiting in the wings who are ready to step up? I mean, I'm just talking here in the US for now, but we could certainly apply the same question across the board, Australia as well. Do they have individuals waiting in the wings who are ready and have been prepped and prepared to take on at least a temporary role in terms of continuity of government, or does the military actually remain essentially in control of the country, and for how long? We know that as far as the insurrection itself, it's going to be very clean and swift. They're going to, once that lever gets pulled, I have no doubt that the military is going to come in and do what they have to do to clear out the remnants of the enemy. But then at that point, we're faced with that problem of who's going to run the country, who's prepared to step up into that leadership role, and how long can we anticipate that there's going to be military presence in every major city in America? Yeah,
it's a great question, and it's as in terms of a planning problem. It's the sort of thing I should get on my desk, but not this scale. And the approach, and I'm speculating now, but the approach would be this: you're going to clean out the worst of the filth. They just have to go. There'll be a few that are still useful, and so you turn them. See, when you're running an op, if you take out one of theirs, they're down one, and you're just sort of basically you're up one because they're down one. But if you flip an opponent, you're up two and they're down one. And as you flip, it creates your power. So you're stuck with this unpleasant but necessary task of dealing with traitors, murderers, you name it, and have them under your control, basically double agents that are now working for you. And this is military history since Cain killed Abel. It's the way you got to fight wars. It's unpleasant. You work with these people, but you got to, because they can do things that your clean skins, with clean hands, are unable to do. Simple things like how to prepare legislation and get it passed. Who knows how to do that? Politicians. Non-politicians haven't got a clue. So you'll get a handful of the politicians, a handful of the bureaucrats, a handful of the military. Pick the ones that you've got leverage over, and leverage, as you can imagine, comes in the form of a 6x8 photograph that if the world saw it, they'd be sucking on a 12-gauge shotgun. You've got leverage over these people, and they will start following orders. Now, on top of that, you're going to have somebody absolutely trustworthy to keep an eye on them. So if they put a foot wrong, and we've already seen evidence of this, even in the US, they put a foot wrong, the deal is now null and void, and they get executed. The famous one, of course, is Nancy Pelosi. She took the deal initially, and then she joined one of many attempts on the president's life. And when they found her guilty of that, the deal was null and void. They frog marched her off. The famous photograph of the marshals arresting her they didn't handcuff her, but they marched her out of the room, and she was executed and dealt with. So what the act of playing Nancy Pelosi has just been continuing. And so that's how we're going to do it. And I presume that in Australia, which is look, we're the same. We're just slightly smaller than continental US, if you don't include Alaska, which is slightly smaller, but with a population of less than 10%. And we got something like 25, 27, depending on how many you want to count, million people, and you got 330 million. And so it's a big, massive land, but an easier problem to solve in terms of the hierarchy of the institutions and the power mechanisms in place. So once you get a hold of the people, you can replace them. The people won't necessarily know that these are bad people. They'll probably select people that are popular but crooked, and they won't necessarily have their crookedness revealed immediately, probably down the track. But immediately they'll just get up there and they'll do what they're required to do. They'll prepare legislation. And then as long as you've got somebody monitoring their work, like a teacher at the front of the classroom, don't talk, keep your heads down, keep writing. When you finish your assignment, bring it up here. I'll have a look at it. I'll red pen the thing, send it back to you until it's back in shape. So there are mechanisms, well-practiced mechanisms, to take a completely flawed system and then turn it around to at least minimize any potential collapse. Because once again, if the system collapses, the black hats win. The system must continue running. There might be a few bumps along the way. There might be areas of the country that are suffering more than others. But as long as the entire nation continues moving forward in a reasonably measured way, then the white hats and we have a chance of victory. We cannot afford, nobody can afford for the system to collapse. That, not for an extended period. Yes, the scare event, yes, will take place. Yes, people will go to their bank accounts and then they should be wearing brown corduroy trousers that day because it's going to be embarrassing otherwise. But once they've got everyone's attention, then they can move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what you just described is in essence what we have we've speculated has been going on now for quite some time. And then, so once the military makes its presence known, and once the floodgates really open, it's going to be interesting to see if they proceed in a similar manner with keeping a lot of these individuals in place, perhaps delaying the exposure of their criminal activity for the betterment of the country long enough for Americans and indeed people around the world to rally around their responsibilities in terms of being able to actually run the nation. And I know that that's been something that has been a very, very consistent message. You and I have talked about that. I mean, you talk about it all the time on your show and on other shows, but we've had several conversations centered around that exact topic. And we're going to, I think, put a finer point on it as well throughout the course of the show tonight in terms of what our real priorities are, why people need to go through this experience, why they need to feel the pain, as you put it, in order to get it. I mean, really, that's what this is all about. It's bringing people under in a controlled environment, but bringing people to the precipice, because as Q told us, only at the precipice will people find the will to change. And then in brackets, it says to participate. And that's exactly what it is that you've been so concerned about in terms of moving forward, because once the storm passes and once everybody has been awakened, so to speak, then the real task of, I think you call it the labors of peace, and ultimately rebuilding every country, every nation around the world that's been subjected to this tyranny for generations. That's when the real difficult work begins. So it's going to be very, very fascinating to see how they all play that, how that all plays out. I mean, we're also focused on getting to that breaking point where the floodgates finally open, but we don't really have too many conversations about, well, what happens after that, right? You know, how is the country going to continue to move forward? And indeed, that I think ties directly into why it had to be this way, why people have to experience this scare event or series of scare events and realize how close we were to the abyss, and that indeed it was the U.S. military and the alliance, the worldwide alliance of the Q operation that saved humanity. But then the question after that becomes, well, now that we've been saved, now that we've been rescued and pulled back from the abyss, how do we move forward collectively as a people? And tying into that as well, I'm curious to get your take on this. This is also speculative, but we're kind of in that zone right now. Do you anticipate that once the storm hits and the floodgates open, however it plays out, that there is going to be some level of declassification of the fact that we've been under continuity of government? Do you think that they're going to reveal to the general public the maybe not everything, but the major aspects of the Q operation? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, they'd have to, because the legality, the lawful nature of the actions taken are paramount. That's the foundation upon which everything, and I mean everything, rests. So it'll be necessary to explain in detail. And so people sit back and go, oh, okay, no problem. So when he said that, that was okay. When he did that, no problem. And that's that trust. Now, trust has been completely eroded, which is a good thing. It truly is, because we've been too trusting of our betters, those that presume to govern and lead us. And exactly. We believed everything they said, whether it was the medical profession, whether it was the media, fill in the blank. That trust is now crashing, which is fantastic. It is a necessary precondition now to rebuild the trust. And hence, once again, ladies and gentlemen, I know you've heard it 1,000 times, that everything the DJT and the White Hats have done from the very, very, very beginning, and this is one of the reasons why it's taken so long, is it had to be lawful. Unilateral ambit action would have negated everything. But the fact that comes out, and yes, that evidence will be revealed, and people will sit back and relax. And let me make a point here, and this is a unique time in human history by many metrics, but, and this is a hat tip to the US military, because only they could have pulled this off. I've worked with many militaries around the world, and the US military leadership, not all of them obviously, because a lot of them are as crooked as any people anywhere, but the White Hats proper are the most moral and competent individuals ever to be in this position, because they have the power to control the planet, and yet they are doing the heavy lifting, as a soldier, sailor, and airman should do. Take the risks, risk their lives, and then hand it back to the civilian people. Now, this is extraordinary. This is unprecedented in global history, even going back to ancient Rome, where the Praetorian Guard secured the leadership of the empire. The Caesars relied on the Praetorian Guard to protect them. But the Praetorian Guard became a force unto themselves, and they would remove emperors and install their own for their own profit. Mm-hmm. And was that a risk here? It would have been, except for the extraordinary, and ladies and gentlemen, I cannot wax lyrical enough on the deeply moral men and women who have led this operation, because they could have put us in a worse hell. And yet, I tell you what, when when they get to the other side after a long, fruitful life, which they have sacrificed much, they're going to hear those lovely words, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
Mm-hmm.
Only the US military could have pulled this off. And so I hope in time the people of the world appreciate the extraordinary quality of the men and women in the white hats who have allowed this and made this happen.
I couldn't agree with you more. The U.S. military, saviors of humanity. And indeed, this has always been right from the very beginning. I mean, Trump is the he's the front man, and he's the leader. He's the public facing leader. But really, we all understand that it is the military white hats behind Trump, the ones that recruited him to run for president, that are really the masterminds of this operation. Not to take any credit away from our amazing president, indeed, but it is the military force behind him. As a matter of fact, he had the Florida Panthers at the White House just today. I don't know if you saw this, but he said something to the effect of,
"Yeah, I did."
Yeah, something to the effect of all these young, powerful people around me. My goodness, and then he went on to say, but I've got some power too. It's called the U.S. military. I've got some power behind me too. It's called the U.S. military, and I thought that was an absolute great. But you make such a great point about the necessity of the erosion of trust, because that is exactly that's what this whole exposure operation is all about. It's getting people to the point where they're no longer going to sit back and just think that they can go on autopilot, and that whatever their needs are, whatever the needs of society happen to be, they're just going to delegate that responsibility to somebody else. That's not to suggest that we're not going to have representative government, but people are going to have an entirely different viewpoint about what that actually means, and actually become engaged in the process. That's really what this is all about. It's about the unity of humanity. That was made very, very clear, that ultimately that is the goal. That's the entire purpose of the movie, is to erode the trust through continual exposure. And in that process, get people to rally around the emerging reality that, yes, indeed, there is a hidden enemy, and that we need moving forward to ensure that this never, ever happens again. So, I mean, I absolutely believe, and I've said right from the beginning, since I started doing my show, that I don't see any way around the declassification of the Q operation. Now, you and I have discussed in the past that, and you being a military guy, special forces guy, you know this better than anybody, that there are certain aspects of war that are ugly, and that a lot of these individuals, they were given a choice that they couldn't really refuse. Like somebody put a gun to their face and said, either you're going to play ball or you're going to be executed. So there may be certain aspects that never get declassified, or at least might not be for many, many years, until the public is really ready. But having said that, you think about what we've already gone over tonight: the Insurrection Act, the stolen 2020 election, the revelation of crimes against humanity. Of course, the Epstein story is not going away. no matter how many times Trump gets up there and he says, "Oh, we need to stop focusing on Epstein." He knows exactly what he's doing in terms of that reverse psychology, keeping that on the front burner for everybody. But once all of these things play out, and we get the revelations of the crimes against humanity, we get the full declass, we learn about the stolen election, we learn about COVID, we learn about all of their different crimes. To me, it would seem completely logical that the general public, who certainly they don't know anything about, they've heard of QAnon, as the media calls it, but they don't really know anything about it. All of a sudden, it's gonna read like prophecy. I mean, to us, it already does, but even to the general public, I do believe that once the veil is lifted and people realize, holy crap, everything that these crazy conspiracy theorists have been talking about has actually played out, they're going to go and look at all of these Q drops, and people are going to be able to figure out, they're going to be able to connect the dots and say, well, clearly there had to have been some sort of a military operation going on here. And I've disagreed with a lot of people that I have great respect for. Certainly some of the people that I work with, and I've been working with for years, have asserted that they think it's more likely that the movie is just going to somehow segue into reality without a declassification of the fact that we've been under continuity of government. And I just don't see how you can do that. And then if you tie that into what we were just talking about in terms of the erosion of trust, if they're not, I mean, what good is it to reveal all of these horrific crimes, but then not tell the truth about how the enemy was actually defeated, and how do we rewrite the history books if we're not being honest about what actually played out? So timing is everything. We know that. And the sequence, I'm sure they have all of this stuff mapped out, but I really don't see any way around them essentially squaring with the people and saying, yeah, we've been under continuity of government. You've been watching a movie to a degree. I mean, and I don't know how far they're going to go with that, but you might recall, and I'll never forget it because it happened on my birthday last year, May 31st, when Trump retruth that post about Joe Biden being executed. You remember that?
Yeah.
Joe Biden being executed and replaced with a clone, or it was something along those lines. But to me, that was a very solid calm that this is going to be the direction that ultimately they're going to have to go, because there's simply no way to rebuild society on a foundation of trust if you don't tell the people the truth about what they've been witnessing. And what greater red pill would it, all the normies out there, for the military to get up there and say, yeah, you know what? We've actually been under continuity of government. And that guy Biden that you thought was the president for 4 years, that he wasn't the real Biden, and so on. I mean, some people have the opinion that that would backfire and that would cause even more turmoil. I happen to think that on the other side of all of this disclosure, that's actually going to help heal the country.
Yeah, it's absolutely necessary. I agree entirely. The truth must come out now. You've said it yourself. Timing is important. There are some truths that'll take some time. For example, let's say that Kennedy was never assassinated back in '63. Now, enough time has passed for the people whose lives were devastated by that event. They have now passed, and there can be, you and I can process that intellectually and go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Now, those that suffered the pain of the event, they had to pass before that could come to light, if it's true. Same now. There are those who are emotionally impacted by, say, Charlie Kirk's death, and if it is revealed, I'm not saying it is, but if it is revealed that he's in Valhalla, he's off to the side, and initially I thought, like many people, I thought, wow, this is going to backfire unless they handle it very carefully. Well, there's two parts to handling it. One is letting enough time slip before you reveal it. Secondly, the awful truth is so great that even the most resistant individual will realize, wow, that was unpleasant, but I can see now why it was necessary. And there will be eventually another category of truths that might never be revealed, that are just too shocking, the impact of which would be collapse society. And as I said before, if society collapses or a nation collapses, then the black hats have won. So we're treading this amazing line between truth, force and fraud. Thomas Hobbes, war is a combination of force and fraud. And so the white hats are treading this line very, very gently. Truths will come out in quick time. Then maybe in the medium term, some more truths will come out. In the long term, some more will come out, and then eventually there'll be some that just won't, because it is just too much for the planet. And when we're talking long-term truths, I'm talking about 100 years. And then beyond that, there might be things that never come out, and people just accept it, because that's the reality. We can't tell a 3-year-old the awful truth about a whole bunch of things. And I don't mean to be condescending, but when people have been so demoralized, have been brainwashed, they've been drugged, they've been made sick and ill, they are incapable of accepting it. And the analogy I use, and it's a good one, is the release of the prisoners from the concentration camps and the forced labor camps in Nazi Germany. The Americans arrived, through the gates open, and they just sat there waiting for instructions. They were so demoralized, which has been the intentional strategy of our adversaries. They couldn't eat meals because their digestive system was so degraded. It would have killed them to have eaten a steak, so they had to give them a very thin soup to slowly build them back up. psychologically, the process is identical. You just can't take the people and shove the ugly truth in their face in one hit, because they will go into individual psychotic shock. And if enough people do it, you've lost an entire
and society
nation.
collapses.
And now, what are you going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, we want, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but we want the truth to come out. We want full disclosure, but not at a price that we're not going to recover from. And that really is,
Correct.
that's the very fine line there. But I happen to believe that once the floodgates open in terms of the crimes of the deep state and the election fraud, the COVID depopulation agenda, all of their various different crimes against humanity, and certainly the pedophilia, the satanic ritual abuse. I mean, once all of this comes out, I believe that the public is going to very rapidly, probably not as rapidly as we want, but I think much more rapidly than most folks would anticipate. There's going to be a switch in their consciousness. There has been the argument that it's been made by many that people are just simply incapable of handling these truths and these realities. And I've pushed back against that really from day one, saying that in essence, what we've got here, and you pretty much described it with the metaphor you just laid out, is arrested development. We have an entire nation of people in many nations all around the world of adult children, because they've been coddled, they've been lied to, they've been deceived, and they've been essentially programmed to be hostile and resistant to the truth. But once the truth actually gets presented to the public and they have the ability to process it, and that's another reason why this has been such a long, drawn out process, I think there's going to be that reversal in consciousness where truth suddenly becomes popular, and people are going to be hungry for it in the same way that we were when we first woke up. And that's also the reason that I made the case for full disclosure. And I always say that it has to be done in a way that is responsible and indeed with military precision. But I mean, so you're not going to put frazzle drip and all of these horrific videos up on the big screen so that everybody can be shocked and traumatized. A lot of people won't come back from that. But there is that balance where you have to stop treating the general public like children if you actually want them to be able to function as adults, and even taking it to the next step of being able to run society. You can't have it both ways. You can only protect people's consciousness so much without still keeping them in that state of arrested development where you have this assumption that adults don't have the ability to accept reality. And if we can't get past that, then essentially what you were just talking about in terms of the inability of people to run the country and to step up and to meet the responsibilities of being citizens of a free and sovereign nation is not going to happen unless you give people the truth. So I've been a huge fan of that.
There will be a percentage that won't accept the truth no matter how long you wait, no matter how gentle you are. And I ran into one last night, believe it or not, local supermarket, and I'll try not to identify the individual by description. But we were discussing things, and I knew that she was big on money. She likes her money, needs money. That's her, in fact, it's her only focus. That's the one metric she has for success. And I raised it simply because you're friendly when you're talking to people in retail. It's a tough job, retail, because you're dealing with all sorts of lunatics all day, every day. So I was just sort of friendly, and I thought, how's it all going? And I said, have you noticed anything about the silver price? And she immediately shut me down, said, I don't do that. I said, okay, that's fine. But very quickly, she knew that who I was and what I did. And she said, well, are you still running that silly show or not? And it turned into abuse. And it was quite interesting. I didn't get offended by it at all, because I could tell, and there's another category of person why they won't accept it. We've all had, most of us, if we admit it, have had spiritual experiences, both positive and negative. We've seen what lives on the other side. And I'm not going to go into too much detail. But her ridiculous, irrational arguments, and at one point she said that I was just a lunatic screaming into the wind, or whatever the expression was, and got quite abusive, and I had said or done nothing wrong to provoke that. And it was clear that, was she possessed? No. But you know the little cartoon of the angel and the devil, and one's whispering and the other's whispering the other side, and you're stuck in the middle? Well, it was like the angel had been kicked off the shoulder, and there was just this demonic voice coming through her because she was irrational. She was inexplicably angry because what I was saying was at variance with her mental construct, and she would, in no time ever will she ever accept anything other than what she says is true. And unless there's money involved for her, she's not interested. She thought I was a fool for trying to fix the problem. No, there's no corruption. Everybody's great. Money matters. And that's all that. And eventually I just I laughed and said, thank you very much. You've made my day. I paid my bill and I left. These people will not survive. And ladies and gentlemen, as cruel as it sounds, there's nothing we can do. As a younger man, I used to be fascinated with the psychological processes of how people ended up where they were. After this long journey through politics, I can tell you, if people don't want their minds changed, I go, great, see you later, au revoir. We'll see you later. That's your life, and I don't have time for it anymore because I have a bigger game to play. And so there are some that will not make it, and we have to accept it. They are free to make their decisions. It's not our responsibility to force anybody to believe anything. We persuade if we can, and if we can't, we let them go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I what you just described, I think is sort of a microcosm of what we're seeing on display and what we'll continue to see on display as this process plays out, this mass psychosis that's been induced by the enemy. I mean, on the one hand, I scroll through social media and I mean, you're seeing it everywhere now with what's going on with ICE and particularly in Minnesota being the focal point, like we just talked about. But these individuals who are, I mean, they certainly, they appear to be possessed by some demonic entity. And I think that those individuals fall into that category of the 4 to 6%, which we mentioned a little bit earlier in the show. But that's millions of people that we're talking about. That's not a small number of people who are not going to make it through this process and in various different ways. I mean, we can't be naive and think that once these horrific realities are fully disclosed to the public, that everyone out there is going to be able to process that information. A lot of people are going to, I hate to say it, but a lot of people are going to be jumping off bridges. A lot of people are going to be reacting violently. And indeed, I think that is exactly the reason why it's had to be a very slow and from our perspective, a very tedious process to go through so that you can reach that critical mass of people who have been front loaded and essentially preconditioned to be able to process all of this information. That really is, that's something that we can never, ever forget, because so often as the awakened or the pre-awakened, as I like to call us, we forget what it's like when you're actually going through the process of awakening. And we were actually willing to go down that road. Like we had a spiritual inclination. We had this connection to God that ultimately led us down this path. We're talking about millions of people out there who have no spiritual grounding, who have no connection to God. And when this is, when the floodgates finally open, it's going to be an ugly process. I mean, the ending is not going to be for everyone. I know that has multiple different meanings, but there are a lot of people who are simply not going to make it through this process of ascending to the next level of consciousness. And it's going to be tragic in a way. And, you know, there is a part of me, I mean, most of these videos I sit there and I watch and I think to myself, my God, these people are insane. And, you know, there's a part of me that gets angry when I watch it. But then I also have moments when I look at these people and I think to myself how tragic it is that they're in this place, kind of like the person that you were describing, where they've just become so cynical, they've become so disconnected from their connection to God that they're just completely incapable of facing reality, and they're going to fight to the bitter end in order to cling to what they believe is I guess their reality or their truth, they're never going to relinquish that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's extraordinary moment. In fact, this might be a good time just to bring in, because this is the moment where people need to understand things. And I'll put up those two slides: resisting despotism, and then why do you have to feel the pain? Let me just put these two up, because I think this is your audience will appreciate it, and I appreciate your audience. They're quite as I said, an educated, astute, and inquiring group. So we're able to speak at a level that we can't always do that. Let me just share screen, and I'll talk you through this once it's up and running.
Yeah. Well, I am a little bit biased because it is my audience, but they are this most incredible group of people out there that I never even knew existed until I actually started doing a show. And all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, there are just so many salt of the earth people out there who truly get it. You and I have mentioned this before in the past. I know that's one of the reasons you like coming on, because we can go into areas that you're not really capable of going on other platforms. And I consider that to be the highest compliment. So let me go ahead and pull this up. And
what are you doing? It's a genuine pleasure, because people like your audience are the leaders of the future, whether they know it or not, whether they want it or not. It's incumbent upon them to lead the country in whatever large or small way they feel so drawn. Not everybody has to become president of the US. Just having a good local leader in your school board or whatever is profoundly important. This is where General Mike Flynn's exactly right. Local action starts small. Historically, after the collapse of a system, a government, a nation, the best way to repair is to start small. Don't design the new presidency. Get in there and design the new school board. Get in there and design the new council. Get in there and sort out the local sheriff's office. Start small and build from there. And that's the way we have to do it. Okay, have you got that resisting despotism slide up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, these two slides struck me, and I thought I'd share it with you because it's deeply important, and it reflects upon the deep wisdom of not only your founding fathers, but many of your historians, your current historians. It's just extraordinary. The erudition, the intellectual integrity is just beautiful. It brings tears to my eyes. But here's one from Thomas Paine, and you'll know Thomas Paine, the author of documents such as Common Sense and others. But here we go. From a small spark kindled in America, a flame has arisen not to be extinguished. Without consuming, like the ultima ratio regum, which is Latin for the last argument of the king, and what the king says it goes. Unlike that, it doesn't consume, but it winds its progress from nation to nation and conquers by a silent operation. Man finds himself changed. He scarcely perceives how. He acquires a knowledge of his rights by attending justly to his interest. And that speaks to that local action. He acquires a knowledge of his rights by attending justly to his interest, and discovers in the event that the strength and powers of despotism consist wholly in the fear of resisting it, and that in order to be free, it is sufficient that he wills it. In order to be free, it is sufficient that he wills it. There are more of us than them. If we stand up, they lose. That's point number one, because people say, what do we do? What do we do? What are we supposed to do? Withdraw your consent. That's right. All we have to do. Is it going to hurt? Maybe. Now, on the other side of it, next question. Why do we have to feel the pain? Why do we have to feel the pain? Well, this is Alan Shaw. He's an historian. He's won a couple of Pulitzers as well as other prizes. Quite an extraordinary man. And he said this. In the colonial world, and this is talking about 1775 leading up to the American Revolutionary War. In the colonial world and the European world, democracy has a bad name. It was a synonym for anarchy. Now, as I read the next words, I want you to think of Donald J. Trump and the United States. It had the reputation of being turbulent as a system exploited by ruthless politicians called demagogues, people who pandered to the passions of the common people in order to whip them up and get them to do passionate things and to get government to serve them and to prey upon the property of the more wealthy people. Well, that sounds a lot like Donald Trump, and the more wealthy people are the globalists. So this is 1775, and when I heard this, I just smiled and thought, wow, nothing changes. So democracy is not the aspiration. Here's the kicker. This is the line that I want you to remember. Democracy is not the aspiration that creates the revolution, which is what the intellectuals like to believe. No, the revolution creates the conditions for people to aspire to have a democracy. Now, that's Alan Shaw's commentary, and it was on a 2025 PBS documentary called The American Revolution. Compelling viewing. Please, ladies and gentlemen, straight after this, find it, watch it, buy it, stream it, whatever you got to do. Watch the entire series. Extraordinary gift of the United States to the rest of the world, and I mean that, and I'm deeply grateful for it. But the point here is, once again, until we feel the pain, we will not aspire to have something different. Until we feel the pain. This pain is creating the conditions for us to say, enough, we want something better. In the Australian context, we've got a constitutional monarchy. Everybody thinks it's great until they realize that they have no enumerated rights and that we can be stepped upon because we are governments that believe they can say and do anything. They can disarm us. They can shut us up. They can keep us quiet. They can lock us up. And all of that has happened. And the resentment is growing to the point where a constitutional republic sounds like a pretty good idea. The revolution creates the conditions for people to aspire to have a democracy. And that's the key point of this. That's why we have to feel the pain. This is when people shift. People shift because they have to. As I said, the intellectuals would like to believe, look, I wrote this beautiful theory. Look, this should motivate you to live a better life.
No, it doesn't work.
It's not going to happen. Yeah, it never happened. The intellectuals look afterwards and say, oh, look at that. That was a good idea. And see, we put the cart before the horse. We forget human nature. I love intellectuals. I love an intellectual argument. But unless there's a practical application that works, it's just words. And so this is the reality. I'm smiling and it's not funny. I get it. People are in real pain. They are suffering. I get it. This is the brutal mathematics of war. We want to save the planet. This is what we're going to go through. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you and your people because it's they're very useful. A couple of very useful ideas.
Well, I absolutely love that bullet point, and I'm paraphrasing it, the one from Thomas Paine, that the strength of tyranny is ultimately fueled by the fear of resisting it. And tying it together with the next slide about, well, why do we have to go through that pain? Well, how do we get over that fear of resistance?
Yeah.
You go through the pain. And once the pain becomes great enough, it's just like any other problem in life. You can ignore it. You can push it off. You can rationalize it. You can make every excuse in the world not to make changes because deep down inside, you're afraid to make those changes. You're afraid of what that's going to mean, what that's going to require of you personally, right? But once the pain gets great enough, all of a sudden people become willing. Pain creates willingness. And that's ultimately what this is all about. And, look, I can completely sympathize and empathize with people who say, you know what, the 4 to 6%, screw them, whatever. They're never going to wake up. They're the reason that everything's taking so long. I would make the argument it's not the 4 to 6%. They're not the reason it's taking so long. It's getting the other 94% where they need to be. It's not the 4 to 6%, but they've already calculated that they've baked that into the cake, so to speak. That's part of the recipe. They already know that not everybody is going to cross the finish line, but that critical mass of 90+% of people, I mean, different percentages have been thrown around, but if Q tells us that 4 to 6% are going to be lost forever, they're not going to make it to the other side. Simple math. You're talking somewhere in the mid 90s in terms of percentage of people. They don't necessarily need to be fully red pilled ahead of the floodgates opening, but they have to be conditioned to be able to process and accept the truth. Otherwise, like you said, it's going to be completely counterproductive. And that's putting it mildly. Society will collapse. But that's really that what we're going through right now is getting people to the point where they finally say enough is enough, and they're no longer scared. It's similar to it relates to what we were saying about people starting to wonder, should I even pay taxes? Right. And I'm not putting myself in a position. I'm not a financial advisor. People have to make their own decisions. I've given my perspective on it. But the point being is that more and more people are starting to challenge the things that they've been afraid of, because they're being presented and such fraud and such waste and such abuse just in terms of their tax money. I mean, that's to say nothing about the crimes against humanity, about the fact that their vote doesn't matter, the fact that that they tried to kill us all. I mean, all of these things are going to come out. But just in terms of finances, people are getting to the point where they're ready to start making decisions that they never would have even never would have even considered in the past, because they've been presented with the truth about where this money actually goes. And, another point I wanted to quickly touch upon that you brought up is something that I've been conveying to my audience, my belief, because I asked myself this question a long time ago. Why is it that I understand? Why is it that I can see and other people can't? And I remember when I first woke up, your initial, and I talked about, when you get red pilled and you finally awaken, you become hungry for the truth. Not only do you want to seek out more truth for your own knowledge, but you also want to spread that around. You want to share that with people. But of course, we've all experienced what it's like to try and red pill the normies. It doesn't work. And so what is the purpose? I mean, why were we pre-awakened? Why were we put in this position where we can see things that the vast majority of the world can't see years ahead of time? And I think it's exactly what you talked about. It's ultimately because each and every one of us, God has a plan for all of us. And certainly I think you and I being, I guess you could say, focal points in the truth community, to a certain extent, our role has been already revealed in terms of, what we're supposed to be doing at this specific time. But once we get to the other side, there's a whole new set of circumstances that's going to involve everybody. It's going to be an all hands on deck situation where everybody out there who's listening right now and who's going to listen to this on the replay was chosen for a reason, so that you could be that steady, calm presence in the lives of all of these normies as they're going through this transition of awakening. So it's going to be not only is it going to be hand holding, I guess you could say, I don't mean that in a condescending way for all of our fellows out there, but ultimately, whether you realize it or not, if you're pre-awakened, you're already in a leadership role. And that ultimately God is going to reveal his will for what role you're going to play as we rebuild on the other side of the storm. So I thought that was an absolutely fantastic point that you made. Anything else you wanted to add to that before we pivot?
Yeah. What you just said about God's got a plan for us all, that is so reassuring, but so important, because you get all sorts of wonderful ideas about the godlike nature of humans. I can manifest whatever I want. It's not happening. Well, you're not manifesting properly. Okay, let's just put this into perspective. Do we have the capacity to create circumstance? Of course we do. Can we set plans and put out a timeline and a couple of hurdles to get over and eventually achieve our? Absolutely. But understand this, and this is for everybody out there who doesn't get it. Do you think Jesus Christ lacked the capacity to manifest, and yet he ended up on a tree dying the most gruesome death of the time because he couldn't manifest? No, there was a plan. And it is absolutely wonderful to know that God has a plan for every one of us, not just the important people, not just the people on a screen. Every one of us. This is the beauty of Christianity. We are all equal in the eyes of God. And some of us can run fast, some can swim, some can cook, some can write music, some are just the best parents. Excuse me. Some can kick a pigskin a long way. It doesn't matter. We are all equal. And when people really integrate that into their lives, then becoming a moral person is quite an easy task. It really is, and that's why it's the first aspect of our end state. We want a moral people. The rest follows from that. And once we really integrate that we are equal in the sight of God, all of us, then it's easy for us to see someone who is struggling to reach down and lift them up.
Mhm.
And that's what we all must do as leaders. Now, that's because somebody had the grace to reach down and lift us up when we were struggling. And so we just continue it. And so that line of yours is just brilliant. There is a plan for every single one of us. None of us gets left behind unless we choose to walk away.
I couldn't agree more. And on the other side of all this, it's been said in many different ways by many different people out there. But the way that, and this ties directly back into what we were talking about in terms of people being hungry for the truth. For so long, people have been conditioned to be comfortable in ignorance. Like that
Yeah.
is, I guess that's probably the best way to describe a normie, right? Is somebody who's just been conditioned to be comfortable in their ignorance, and they've just accepted that the reality that's been the matrix, not the reality, but the reality that's been presented to them, which is indeed the matrix. They become so they become so accustomed to that mentality, to that level of consciousness, that low level of consciousness. But once the truth gets infused into these people's minds, it's going to radically transform people. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, there's going to be a grieving process. People are not going to want to believe the truth. The various different phases of grief, which I think you and I have talked about in the past, we're going to see that manifest on the grand scale. But on the other side of that, for a vast majority of the population of the world, people are going to go through a process of entirely reprioritizing their lives. It's like, once you get awakened and you realize the true nature of the world and that everything is a deception and that everything is a lie, you never look at anything the same way again. And what naturally happens as a byproduct of that is that you reprioritize everything in terms of what you're willing to devote your time and your energy and your focus to, because you realize that some things just simply don't matter. And that, I do believe, is going to be the Great Awakening. It's not just so much about, revealing the evil and exposing all of this darkness, but rather it's the shift in consciousness of humanity, where we go from wallowing in ignorance to suddenly being awake and aware, and gravitating toward, instead of gravitating toward comfort, like you talked about, of your countrymen, just want to sit back and they just want a cold beer, and they want some nice grilled food on the barbecue and to watch a sporting event. I mean, that describes a vast majority of the world. I think that on the other side of this, people are going to look at all that and they're going to say, my goodness, I can't believe I was wasting all of my time and my energy thinking about this when we were so close to the edge of destruction. And there's going to be this monumental shift in consciousness. That's the way I've always characterized the Great Awakening. So having said that, and this is a great conversation, I always knew it would be. Every time we start talking, we never quite know where it's going to go. We have a basic idea, but that's one of the things about Rick and I we do so well, is we just kind of vibe off of each other. But I do want to get your perspective on the geopolitical picture right now, because there's a lot of stuff going on. We covered the domestic side of things. Let's talk about the broader geopolitical landscape right now. So we had the raid on Maduro, which I believe I brought up a little bit earlier in the show, which is, I think it's a foregone conclusion. This is going to play a key role in exposing the 2020 election. I don't think I need to make that case to you or to anybody out there in the audience. We've got, so that happened, and we're going to see how that plays out. Maduro's scheduled to be, his trial's scheduled to begin on the 17th of March. Imagine that. So that's what's going on with Venezuela. And then we've got the conversation about annexing Greenland is escalating dramatically. And, Trump continually saying that we need Greenland for purposes of national security. And I can remember in early 2025 when he started talking about Canada as a 51st state and acquiring Greenland. And we're all going, where did this come from? I wasn't anticipating any of this. But indeed, that narrative is getting very rapidly amplified, or continually amplified, I should say. So we've got Greenland, we've got the Venezuela situation. Then over in Iran, we've got the strike that was called off at the last minute. It looked like a classic Trump head fake there. But the optics certainly of the ongoing revolution in Iran is playing a very important role on the geopolitical stage. And the sum of all fears, World War III scare event that's been talked about for such a long time now seems to be very much on the table. We've got military exercises that are ongoing in South Africa, I believe, with China, Russia, and Iran. We had Tucker Carlson come out and say that Russia is actively considering using nuclear weapons against the UK and Germany. Again, this is all optics, folks. I don't believe any of this is going to happen, but it's contributing to the buildup to this scare event. And then, of course, there's been the popularization of the as they're calling it, the Don Roe doctrine, not the Monroe doctrine, but the Don Roe doctrine, which, of course, represents Trump's maneuvering to consolidate U.S. power and control over the Western Hemisphere. And I know that not too long ago, I was listening to a breakdown you did with Captain Kyle on the strategy there in terms of the Western Hemisphere being under U.S. control, and very likely we're going to see this multipolar balance of power between the three superpowers: the United States, Russia, and China. Of course, we know that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have been working with Trump all along. It's made very clear in the drops, Q140 to be specific. So I was hoping that you could give us your perspective and kind of give us a bit of a breakdown of the geopolitical stage as it currently stands. Any of the hot spots that I mentioned, I'm curious to get your thoughts on.
Sure. Yeah, no, we're in a great time. We can finally talk about this stuff a little more openly. Okay, we know the capitulation tour started the ball rolling. One by one, DJT started signing everybody up. I mean, everybody. That's the beauty of it. It is everybody. The United Kingdom got stitched up. Zelensky, Africa, or many countries in Africa, India, the Middle East, the unprecedented Middle East movement. Qatar most recently signing up with Kash Patel. Qatar became a special tier one type ally of the United States. So anything that happened to Qatar happened in the United States. And what we've seen now is the dismantling of the control structure that the Committee 300 and the British, which have been running this whole show for the longest time, that has been progressively dismantled. And now the guy running the show is Donald Trump. And so the Greenland issue, for example, let's talk about Greenland. How dare he say that this belongs to me and we're going to take it because if we don't, the Chinese and Russian will. That's the typical belligerent one-liners that Trump says to get people angry. Yeah. But he already controls all of these countries. We had the humiliation tour as the European leaders came to the White House and took a knee to Trump. And that was to show that he controls the world. And not because he's got the biggest military, which he does, and not because he's not afraid to use the military, which he will, but because it's all legal. Why? Because all of the corporations that control the planet were, like any corporation, can be taken over, can be bankrupted, can be bought and sold. And so when he tells good old anybody, I like that land, I'm taking it. That's because the deal's been done. He's taking it and he's making it look like it's just an act of bravado and I'm the biggest bully on the block. But the reality is it all has a legal underpinning to it. Yep. And so he's running, folks, newsflash, if you hadn't seen it, he's running the planet. Now, maybe I shouldn't say that so explicitly, but if you're wondering why all this stuff happened, he says the most amazing stuff, and there seems to be no legitimate pushback. It's just a rant here and a rant there, but he just moves on because it's all being done. Now, does that mean he wants to be king of the world? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is not the purpose of this. Once again, he wants us to run our own countries. But he has dismantled the fake and sometimes real tensions between nations, and everyone's going to have to behave themselves unless they get a backhander from dad You know, Trump walks in with big dad energy, settles down all the kids that are fighting in the rumpus room, right? That's
literally how he's talking. He's saying, you know, Iran, you better behave. You know, he's literally talking like daddy to his kids. And I think that's a comment.
And so what happened? Yeah, and it's all underpinned by this lawful legal control mechanism, which has been used against all of us for the longest time. That's been now taken over, and he's now running the show. But he's now running it in a moral way, and he's giving us opportunities to step up and demonstrate that we have the desire, the ability to do what's right for our people, to serve our people. That's the point. He's not looking for the next national leader that can speak with rounded vowels and inspire his people. No, he's looking for somebody who actually wants to serve. This is servant leadership at its greatest. If anybody has the privilege to represent their people, whether it's in a county or a state or a federal, it's about servant leadership. You serve the people. It's an inverted triangle, so to speak. The people are on top and you're underneath doing what you're told to the best of your ability. So that's what's going on. So that's the big picture. So when he says we're going to control the Western Hemisphere, yeah, that's because he's going to make his way down from Venezuela all the way down to Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire at the bottom. And he's going to make sure the kids don't misbehave. Now, if that sounds a little condescending, suck it up, princess, because when dad's gone and mum's not there and the kids are in the rumpus room, you come back and the place is a mess. There's crap everywhere. Nobody's done the dishes. The scrambled eggs under the table. The dog's now licking up something that he dragged in from outside. And thankfully, dad and mum come home. They clean up the mess. They hold the kids. And I actually had this experience when I first graduated. It was funny, as you got to turn up with that big dad energy. I just joined my first platoon as an infantry platoon commander. Just graduated, and the battalion was already out scrubbed. The brigade was out scrubbed, and I got trucked in, and I met my platoon sergeant, and he was a champion of a guy, just brilliant, brilliant guy. And he said, "Oh, sir, welcome to the platoon, 3 platoon, A company, 2nd, 4th battalion. Look, small problem. 2 of the section commanders, in our parlance, so your squad leaders, in our army, they're corporals, and yours, they're sergeants. The 2 squad leaders, I'll use your language, had a bit of a dust up in front of the troops. Do you want me to handle it?" And I thought, no, this is a good chance for me to stamp my authority on the platoon. So the sergeant he brought them up, these 2 corporals. And I said, in very colourful military language, pull your fucking heads in. You got a responsibility. I mean, you do that again, I'll fucking take out myself. And the sergeant was sort of standing behind them with his arm folded going, yeah. He heard exactly what he wanted to hear. He had a platoon commander that knew what he had to do and was willing to do it. Now, I'm not suggesting that's the way you do it, because I have my leadership style, other people have theirs. That's the way I did it. So I stamped my authority on that platoon really quick, smart. And I said to them, don't shake hands. That's bullshit. Just get back and get your job done. And they went. And that's what's happening on a global scale. The big dad energy of Donald Trump is in there. The sometimes nonsensical conflicts between nations, the sometimes real conflicts between nations, sort it out. This is enough. You will sort it out whether you like it or not, or you won't be here much longer. And because most of these national leaders are egocentric tosses anyway, they want the job, so they'll do what they're now told. And so that's what's going on. That sets the scene for the geopolitical status of the planet. It's brilliant. It's just so cool. Now we can dive down into each country, and as I said, the Venezuela issue is big because it's to do with, is it about drug trafficking? Insofar as that provides the cash which allows them to then control whatever they want to control through Cuba and through China and everywhere else. Maduro's no great cabal leader. He's just another puppet, like all the rest of them. And what happened did happen, but not when you thought it happened. So you just make that point. Yeah. Brave men did go in and do brave things, but it wasn't the week before last. This was some time ago, and now it's allowed to come out. You don't go on stage until the actors are well rehearsed and they know their lines and the blocking's in place and they know where to stand and what they have to do, and then they leave the stage, right? So that did occur. So brave men do brave things, just so you're aware. It's a movie, but not without risk. And but it was more about that. It's about child sex trafficking. It's also about election fraud. It was always about fill in the blank, just so much. And as I think I said previously somewhere, he's going to continue working down to South America, not because he wants to control South America, but he wants the South American countries to start serving their people. Somebody had to say it, and it fell to him to do it. And so while we've got the US military as the Praetorian Guard, so to speak, please never doubt that Donald J. Trump is the legitimate and powerful president, and he does exactly what's got to be done, as only Trump could. And this is, please understand that that man is just extraordinary. He's a force of nature, and nobody could have done what he did. Nobody.
Exactly.
No general admiral in the US military could have done it. They've done what they can do, and DJT had that big dad energy to step in and do what he had to do and make it all happen. Now we're all the beneficiaries of it. And again, is it disconcerting that we have to be treated that way? Well, we allowed it to happen, so we've got no one to blame but ourselves. So that's the context of any geopolitical events you watch from now on. No, it's been done. It's sorted. It's signed up. It's brilliant. This man will go from success to success to success to success. I think last year I said, when they were facing the no, what was it? My God, the years are flying past too quickly. The certification of the election where Pence didn't do what he was supposed to do. And I said, it's okay. From here on, everything after that one, the next one, all be good, because in a crisis situation, there are three things you got to deal with. It doesn't matter whether you're a president or a corporation. One, continuity of operations. You've got to keep the company running. Two, you got to make sure you're doing everything legally. Three, brand management is critical. You cannot let the brand be damaged to the least degree. And DJT was the brand, and what happened? Everywhere Trump goes, the doors open and good things occur. And that's just going to continue, particularly now when there's going to be some very nasty revelations, and we're going to need a psychological anchor to hold on to make sure we get through it. And that's what Trump only Trump could do. So that's an overview of geopolitical. That's the prism we should look at every event we see from now on.
I agree. Absolutely. And like we were saying a little bit earlier, the military is the force behind Trump, but nobody, as you just said, nobody could pull this off other than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He's literally, he was chosen. We were just talking about God has a plan for all of us. Donald Trump was chosen. He was born for this. And I don't think I have to make that case for this audience, but you're absolutely spot on. So let me pull up. I actually put out a post on the geopolitical situation, and I'm curious to get your take on it, because I did get a pretty positive response to this on X. So let me go ahead and pull it up, and I'll read it. And I'm curious to hear your take. It's sort of a broad spectrum overview of where we're at right now in terms of the multipolar balance of power that I was referencing a moment ago, and the fact that everything that we're witnessing right now play out is actually a replay. Like you said, brave men have done brave things, but they're not doing it in real time. We're actually watching the replay of events that have already transpired. So with that, let me pull up this post. I'll read it really quickly, and I want to hear your feedback. So I wrote, nobody wants another U.S. war. Of course, that's the big, black pill right now. Oh, Trump's going to get us into another war, and we're going to go to war for Israel, and all of that nonsense. Right? I mean, it's totally laughable. But nobody wants another U.S. war. But what so many people fail to understand is that there isn't going to be one. Why? Because it already happened. All of the optics we're being subjected to are necessary to create the illusion that's going to bring us to the precipice. I just said this before. None of this is playing out in real time. Replays are necessary. And this is the part here that I'm very curious to hear your take on as well. There's no way the white hats would risk taking us to the edge of destruction while the enemy still had any power. They're already dead. And then I went on to say Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, Mexico, Colombia, Ukraine, Taiwan. What did they all have in common? All of them were cabal strongholds, and all of them have already been dealt with. What we're currently witnessing is the single greatest covert military operation in world history gradually being revealed to the public. Once you understand that, everything else makes sense. Israel's being saved for last. It's that simple. Enjoy the show. So, it was kind of like a snapshot of the way I see the geopolitical picture right now, but I'm curious to get your take. Am I over the target, or am I missing something here?
No, you're right. You're right over the target. You're making a lot of sense. It's exactly right. That's exactly what's occurred. And if people think that that's not true, let me break some bad news to you, NFL fans that haven't seen the truth yet. Every game you've watched for years and years has been completely scripted. Every catch, every injury, every win, every loss, absolutely scripted. It's classified as entertainment, not sport. Therefore, it can be fallacious. So I hate to break the news to you once again. Don't shoot me. I'm just a piano player. I'm just singing a song. But the fact is, it's all being scripted, everything. And so once again, what the White Hats are now doing, they're flipping the tables. They're doing to the bad guys what the bad guys have been doing to us for the longest time. So all of this is all scripted. What makes a great movie? Great actors, central casting. The comms have been out there. We know that's the case. So what you said is exactly right. Now, I just would add one thing. All those countries you mentioned are cabal strongholds. That's true. There are others where they're strongholds, but not because of our influence on the world, but because of what's been going on here. And let me give you an example, Australia being one. There's been some extremely nasty stuff going on underground in Australia for a long time now. But Australia, my understanding, was to be the cabal center of operations for the next 1,000 years. Why is that? Small, dumb population, all the resources you want. That's why a lot of our natural resources, and we're something like, I think, 7th in the world, or very close to Saudi and the rest of them in terms of natural resources, and yet we're not being strip mined like the rest of the planet because the cabal wanted to hang on to the resources. And it didn't matter what it was. So it's got all the resources in the world. It's an island continent, plenty of space. You can't get here easily. There's no contiguous land operations, land borders rather. But Australia is Israel's last. I get that. That's in terms of the power structure of the planet. Australia isn't part of the power structure at all, but there's some very nasty stuff going on. So when Australia gets revealed, what's going on in this country gets revealed, there'll be a lot of misery down in the great southern land. So yes, what you've said is correct, but there are other countries where a lot of bad things have happened. That will come out in time, and Oz is going to be one of them. So it's going to be as I said, it's going to be a bittersweet year and a bittersweet decade to follow. But yes, your summary is right on point.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you're the guy that I would want to run that by to say, okay, Rick, what am I missing here? And if there's anything that I'm not quite picking up in terms of the big picture, you're the guy that I would refer to. So I appreciate you giving me that feedback, really just on behalf of my audience. I do the best I can to try to paint a picture for everybody. And since you mentioned specifically Australia, I know that you and I had discussed prior to going live here that we were going to bring up the hate speech laws that have been recently proposed, and I actually got them. I got them on X here. Let me go ahead and pull that up so folks can see. But we're also focused on what's happening here in the U.S. Oftentimes, we don't pay significant attention to the scenarios that are playing out in Australia and in other countries as well. So this is I guess an exposure draft. And I'm not going to read through the entire thing, but just kind of give you the highlights. And then I want you to comment on this, Rick, and give us your perspective on, we are watching a scripted movie, but we're also seeing these types of optics being presented here. And obviously, when you see something like this, it gives you pause, and you have to examine what it is that you're actually looking at. So I'm curious to hear you to give us your take. So essentially, what we've got here is this new law that's saying that it is immaterial whether the target or members of the target group are actually distinguished by the particular race, color, or national or ethnic origin. The conduct actually results in hatred of another person or group of persons, or the conduct actually results in any person feeling intimidated, fearing harassment or violence, or fearing for their safety. Then it goes on down here to say doesn't. Well, actually, I can skip past that part, but it ties in religion as well. And here is where we get to the actual law as it's being written here in terms of quote unquote hate speech. publicly promoting or inciting racial hatred, etc. A person that commits an offense in engaging in conduct in a public place, engaging in conduct intending to promote or incite hatred of another person, the target, or a group of persons, the target group, because of race, color, national or ethnic origin, or religion, etc., etc. And then it goes on to say that the penalty would be imprisonment for 5 years. And it gives an example here, very interesting, inciting anti-Semitic hatred against Jews. Interesting that they use that as an example in a public place where a reasonable member of the Jewish community would feel would be intimidated or fear violence. And so, you know, we've seen, and I'm just going to remove this for the moment. I could bring it back up in a second, but we've seen these types of hate speech laws be implemented. Certainly in the UK, there's been a lot of attention. A big spotlight has been shined on that, where you've got, last I checked, it was somewhere in the area of 12 to 15,000 people that have been in prison, supposedly, in the UK under these hate speech laws. More recently in the United States, Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. Again, I believe this is optics, but they've also been kind of pushing this narrative about, well, we've got to use Section 30 to get the social media companies to rein in hate speech, and they kind of kicked up a hornet's nest here in America, and now we're seeing something similar play out in Australia. So we are watching a scripted movie, but there you are in Australia, and that I don't know exactly where that law is, whether it's just been proposed, whether it's actually been passed at this point, what the status is. But I'm curious to get your take on, you know, when you see this type of legislation proposed, how do you interpret that, and what are your thoughts about it?
Well, we already have in the Australian Capital Territory, which is the territory around our national capital, Canberra. It's a bit like your Washington, D.C. It's its own territory, has its own government, territory government. And you may not criticize Islam there.
So that's already on the book.
That's been on the books for years.
Okay.
So this is that let's put the first one in and see what happens. And then they have a few false flag operations, which they had. And again, the perennial victims of everything, the Jewish community. There's no victim like a Jew. And don't get me wrong, this is not anti-Semitic. There's no victim like a Palestinian either. And I've said publicly, fuck the Jews, fuck the Palestinians. It's got nothing to do with us. We have an island to our north where 100,000 Irian Jayas have been killed. Irian Jayas have been killed by Kopassus, the Indonesian Special Forces. That's my focus. It's in our national interest. So just so we get clear on it. I don't care about Israel. I don't care about Palestine. That's an open wound that has been intentionally left open forever. Now, having said that, so we had a couple of false flags where there are allegedly anti-Semitic attacks, which were proven to be done by Jews themselves. And then we had an anti-Semitic attack in Bondi Beach, allegedly. It's a false flag by a couple of Muslims. And you can tell it's a false flag because the photographs were there of the actors getting the blood put on them. And then I spoke to somebody the other day. He said, "Oh no, I know somebody who was there." And I said, "Oh, well, maybe somebody was there, but it still doesn't not make it a false flag. It wasn't what it was suspected." And you can tell how quickly it was a false flag simply by the speed by which they identified who the shooters were, where they lived, where the guns came from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just happened so quickly.
And the entire event was filmed, literally.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm watching it, and I was working on my laptop, and the bride was sitting opposite me, my wife and chief of staff, and we talk as we work. And she said, "Have a look at this." And she hit the play button, and I looked up, I watched for about 15 seconds. I said, "False flag," and I went back to work. That's how lame it was, seriously. It was just no good. Point is, that was there in order to generate an excuse for these laws. Now, once again, it is a script. It's part of the show. We are supposed to push back. We're supposed to be horrified by this idea of this legislation, and even reading the legislation as it's written there. It says it's got to happen in a public place. Well, once the legislation's in place, all you've got to do is change that word to public to anywhere, in private. And in fact, we had I can't remember what position she had, but there's a woman who's monitoring. Damn, I've had a mental blank on this idiot. But basically, she said, "It's terrible. At some point, you know, they'll sit around their kitchen table and say nasty things to people." So literally, that was their objective rather, to eventually get to the point where you can't voice an opinion.
Yep.
and that legislation. There is no identified victim. There's no identified crime being committed. And yet, if someone feels intimidated, well, here's one for the Jews. Fuck you. Now, come and sue me on this one. I've had a gutful of the Jewish community, not Jaime, who runs the local kosher deli. I'm talking about the state of Israel. When was the last time you did anything for anybody? How many times do you have to trot out this number of 6 million? How many times do you have to cut the foreskins off of your little boys and have some rabbi suck on it and call it religious duty? You're a bunch of sickos that are reading the Talmud, which is ancient Babylonian religion that was meshed into the original Hebrew religion. So what you're following is a bunch of nonsense. Now, if the Jews feel intimidated, good, because I want you and your ridiculous religion, if you wish to impose it, out of the country. Why? Because you're a bunch of supremacists, just like the Muslims are supremacists, just like the Hindus are supremacists. That is inconsistent with living and working in this country. Now, if you feel intimidated, good, get the fuck out of Australia. Now, if you can behave yourself here and make sure your behavior is consistent with our secular law, which is based on a Christian ethic, fill your boots. You can pray to whichever lunatic God you want to pray to. By the way, the Jews' God sounds like some adolescent that's been denied a beer for the first time when he turns 13. I am a jealous God. Fucking really. You lunatics. Now, I'm being obviously offensive because I want you to feel intimidated because you have no place in this country. Your practices, if you practice them, have no place, just like the Muslims and the Hindus and everybody else. This is a Christian country. Your behavior must be consistent with our secular law, which is based on a Christian ethic. I don't know how clear I can make this. I don't like Jews or hate Jews. Just behave yourself. I don't hate or like Muslims. Behave yourself. I don't like and dislike Hindus. Behave yourself. The first step to this country is that we're a moral people, and everybody agrees on morality. Well, here's our definition. A moral people is a group that agrees the difference between right and wrong, and then thinks, speaks, and acts to advance the right and eradicate the wrong. Now, if you think marrying a girl at 6 and consummating that marriage at 9 is good, I've got bad news for you, and I hope you feel intimidated, every Muslim out there. You'll be hung by your neck till dead, because that's called pedophilia.
That's right.
Now, fortunately, in this country, we have, in the state of Victoria, which is our most left-leaning state, we have judges that say, oh, well, he didn't know, it's okay, it's culturally appropriate for him, let's let him off. Those days are gone. So you should be intimidated. It doesn't even begin to what you should be feeling. You should be terrified. You should be applying for a passport to get the fuck out of Australia and take your shit with you, because that will not be tolerated in this country. This is a Christian nation. We're not handing it over. And one more time for the dense ones out there, with an IQ of lukewarm water because you're consanguination, because you marry your cousins. If you don't get it, believe anything you want to believe, but your actions must be inconsistent. You must be consistent with Australian secular law, which is based on Christianity. Now, what I've just done quite intentionally and rudely, and I did that for effect, was to show you what I'm making a reasonable statement in terms of what I want for this country. Now, if the Jews, the Muslims, and the Hindus and anybody else is offended, I don't care. I really don't care, because your insane beliefs are killing our children. Now, you can stay here. You can have a fruitful life. That anybody who tries to bring that nonsense into this country or curtail our right to say that you're full of it, you're on a very fast track to a very bad place. So, as I said, I did that on purpose. I did that for effect. I was a bit energized, just to let people know that there's worse things than saying the Jews are a problem. Well, that's it. Come and sue me. Come and get me. Remember that slide we saw earlier about resisting despotism? Mm-hmm. That's what it looks like, folks. That is a prima facie example of saying, you have no standing. You're a bunch of frauds, and I don't care what rules you write. I'm not following your orders anymore. Signing off. So you get my drift now. So that's what we're talking about with this ridiculous law. People have to stand up and go, no. How does that mean somebody that is prejudicial against an individual because of their color or their beliefs? No. But if they're antithetical to the good order of this country, to social cohesion, to morality, to all those things, then yeah, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem. Otherwise, hey, welcome to Oz. Have a great time.
Amen, brother. Absolutely. And I think that what you just conveyed, I personally believe is the whole reason that we're seeing all of these hate speech laws and all of these reports about people getting thrown in jail for social media posts, to do exactly that. Going back to what we were saying about the need to go through the pain and the need to ultimately be able to find the will to defy tyranny, to overcome that fear, to push people to the brink, to push people to the precipice. Now, I don't know. I can't answer the question. Like, some people will ask me, well, Patriot, do you think that there's actually 12, 15,000 people who have been imprisoned in the UK for hate speech laws? I don't know. I honestly don't know how much of that is optical and how much of that is actually real and playing out. But regardless, I believe that the ultimate design is to get people to that point where they're no longer afraid to stand up and to say, this is our country. This is our moral code. This is how we define morality. And in order to be coexisting with us as Christians in our country, you have to behave. It's like a common theme we've been talking about, like we talked about with Trump being the big daddy in the room. But ultimately, I think it's trickling down to all of the people, to get people to rise up and to just say enough is enough.
Yeah. Look, I've lived in other countries for many years. The longest time was 5 years in the Emirates. And as a good guest in somebody else's country, I observed the social and religious mores as appropriate when I was in that country, because I was a guest in somebody's home.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go during Ramadan. I didn't go outside and shove a hamburger in my face and have a cigarette and a drink of water. I was respectful of their beliefs, not because I agreed with it, but because I was a guest in somebody's home. And, same thing. You come to our country, you're a guest. Be polite. Be nice. It's not that hard.
It's not. And what we're seeing is the exact opposite. I mean, just look at all the videos out there of all the Somalis who are basically saying, this is our country and Americans were taken over. And, the Muslims saying that they're going to implement Sharia law and all of this stuff, just being overtly belligerent. I'm a little bit suspect. I mean, I think some of that stuff is organic. Don't get me wrong. But I'm a little bit suspect. I mean, it's so over the top that a big part of me believes that a lot of it is central casting. A lot of that stuff is being produced and put out there by the white hats to generate that effect, to get people offended, right? And not the people out there who are running amok and basically taking advantage of our free society, but the people who are actually living in that society, the ones who are paying taxes, the ones who are doing all the heavy lifting, who are being defrauded and basically disrespected at every turn. I think that's really the design behind that, is to ultimately galvanize the people, not to incite hatred against a group of people. That's not what it's all about. And that's exactly what you articulated. And I've said this over and over. It's not about, and when we talk about Israel, we're not talking about every Jew on the planet. And just like with every other group, I mean, there's good elements and there's bad elements in every group. But ultimately, in order for us to move forward as a society, to rebuild from the ground up, we have to have this base of understanding of, this is what a moral people and a moral culture does and operates. This is how we behave. And you have to conform to that if you're going to coexist amongst us. And that's a consistent message that you've been laying out there for quite some time. And all of this stuff with the Quality Layering Center in Somalia and illustrating all of the fraud and just seeing all of these people out there, they're just throwing it in our faces over and over and over and over again. To me, that can't be organic. I've said many, many times, if it's over the top, it's an op, or at least it's part of it. Doesn't mean that there aren't certain elements of it that are organic and real. But I would say, at least in my opinion, a vast majority of what we're seeing is being scripted for that very reason.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. Although having said that, you'd be amazed what passes for normal in some of these countries overseas. You'd think that can't be real, but it is. It's
well, yeah, right.
Yeah,
but they want to do that. If they want to do that in their country, in their space, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's not our primary concern. But what is our primary concern is it playing out in amongst all of us, and us being victimized by this invasion, ultimately, that's been engineered by the enemy. to do exactly what it's done,
Yeah.
to bulk the population.
There is a moral element that transcends national boundaries, because at the moment we trade with China. Australia has been maneuvered into a situation where we've lost all our manufacturing. That's now outsourced to China, and we are thereby compelled to trade with them. Now, China, we know, is a despicable nation in terms of its treatment, say, of the workers. Basically, they have a slave economy. They harvest organs from the Falun Gong as well. They are the ethnic. Oh no, the Falun Gong, who are the meditators. They're very healthy individuals. You can order a heart, lung, whatever you need. Just order online and they'll deliver it. No waiting for somebody to die. None of that inconvenient waiting. They also harvest organs from the Uyghur, who are the ethnic Chinese Muslims, for the Middle Eastern market. You want a halal heart lung operation? No problem. We've got somebody, we'll take it out of them and put it in you within a week or two. That's going to end.
Yep.
Because this is where our convenience, our wealth is predicated on slaves. Our wealth is predicated on the murder of individuals. That's got to stop.
I agree.
And so we rebuild this morality issue must begin to transcend national boundaries, so that doesn't continue. I mean, how can we sit here in Australia and the moral superiority of the Tesla drivers, where the cobalt being dug out of Africa by 5 and 6 year old children, so they can sit back and feel morally superior because they're not putting CO2 into the atmosphere? How can they feel morally superior when they're selling their grain, their barley and wine to a country that rips organs out of people to make somebody else healthy, and they just kill people? That's got to end. And so progressively, and China's a good example, progressively China's going to have to change its ways. And by progressively, I don't mean over a 100-year period. Now, there are 5 or 6 regions in China which are largely coherent in terms of cohesive in their own cultural and language backgrounds. And China will be broken up, and that they will want to stay together, but it's going to be more of a federated nation where these kingdoms of their own, not so much kingdoms, but you get my drift, will operate themselves in a federated system instead of having this totalitarian one-party state. That's going to change over time, and that's going to be by not only by design but by necessity, because nobody's going to trade with them. Because I'm sorry, China, suck it up, princess. Your life as the Middle Kingdom, the greatest 5,000-year-old civilization on the planet, is about to come to an end because of the god-awful truth that you are a billion soulless slaves that will do whatever you're told without thinking about it. Now, there's one quick solution to it. We have to introduce this guy called Jesus Christ that we nailed to a tree 2,000 years ago for saying how nice it would be if we were just good to each other. And once Christianity takes over China, as it will, it is growing faster and faster and faster in China. And they execute the Christians there, like they do in Africa. But once Christianity enters China, that transition will accelerate dramatically. And so I'm optimistic that this transition, this moral transition of the planet, which is foundational to our ongoing success as a planetary species.
It's a great point.
It is necessary. And the only moral standard that gives us a chance of surviving as a planet is Christianity. You don't have to become a Christian. Be better if you did, but you can, let's say, you can enjoy the benefits by starting your day understanding that you are no important than the next guy in the room, whether that person's a billionaire or that person is homeless and sitting on the side of the road hoping somebody flicks him 20 cents so he can get a drink. Once we start from that perspective that we all have that divine spark, we're all made in the image of God, it's the only place that you can start where we have a chance to survive as a family, as a town, a city, a state, a nation, and a planet. And so this Christian revival, for want of a better word, will permeate every nation eventually. And some will take longer than others, and that's their problem. They better behave themselves until they get there. It'll pervade every nation, and eventually we'll become a Christian planet rather than a slave planet. And man, oh man, I can't wait.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Well, let me ask you, I want to drill into this a little bit more in terms of China, because we were talking about the multipolar balance of power with the United States, Russia, and China. And certainly we
Yep.
know the United States is a Christian country. Russia is a Christian country at this point. China is a little bit more gray area, like you just described. Now, we do believe, or at least, and I know that you're in agreement that there's been this alliance between these three leaders, Trump, Xi, and Putin. So, how do you see Xi Jinping? What lens do you look at him through? Do you think he's going to be the one to begin to make that transition? Do you see him as being sort of a gray hat type of a guy where they're working with him for strategic reasons? What's your take on him? Because China is always a very difficult conversation, because again, we can see how this global alliance, we see the evidence of it everywhere, but as you correctly pointed out, there's a lot of things that presumably are still going on in China that are very problematic. And indeed, if we're going to get to that point where that morality that we're rebuilding in our own countries transcends national boundaries, as you said, China has to play a very important role in that. So how does Xi Jinping factor into that in your eyes?
Yeah, Xi Jinping, you remember how early in Donald Trump's first presidency, Xi Jinping turned up to Mar-a-Lago. That was the beginning of the end. Now, Xi Jinping, like all dictators, isn't all powerful. He was fighting factions within Chinese power structure that were wanting to bring him down. It's not like he was comfortably sitting on the throne. Like every king, the crown, unsteady lies the crown on the head of the king, because there's always a pretender to the throne ready to take it from him. And Xi Jinping was exactly in that situation. A bit like bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, okay? He owes his life to Trump. There's an ally for life.
Oh,
Xi
yeah.
Jinping politically and in a very practical sense also owes his life to Trump. And so that's why he brought him across. That was the first step. That was the sign. So Xi Jinping's been working hand in glove with Trump from the earliest moments of this operation.
Mm-hmm.
Xi Jinping's adversaries were neutralized, is the best way to describe it. And there's a number of ways to neutralize an adversary. And that secured his position. And then in return, Xi Jinping had to respond to the big dad energy in the room and start behaving himself. And so that's what's been happening. So both Putin, and Putin's been replaced, we know that, but Putin and for the sake of the movie, Putin and Xi Jinping have been working hand in glove with DJT from the beginning. And so there's been this subterranean shift within the geopolitics of China, who's in charge, which dragon family is now going to be pulling the levers and who's not, who's being revealed and who's not, which Chinese billionaire disappears and doesn't. You've heard all these stories over the last few years. All of a sudden something happens and, oh gosh, this Chinese billionaire said something and he was removed from the face of the earth. Nobody knows where he is. So all of these things have been happening, just like they have happened in every other country where the troublemakers have been taken out and the deal has been accepted by certain other people to do what they're told. And so that's my take. They've been under control. They're doing what they're required to do. There is no risk of a conflict between Russia, China, and the US. They are all working hand in glove. And then progressively, that alliance, that hidden alliance, and it is very much hidden, spread out around the rest of the world, where national leaders were taken out, replaced, or agreed to play a role. And so that's my take on China.
Brilliant. Yeah, I agree with you. All right. Well, we've been on now for a couple of hours, but I did want to briefly touch upon the financial element of everything that's going on here in this fifth generation war. You and I spoke a little bit before the show about the silver obsession that's going on right now. But let me just sort of lay this out here. So we've got we've got the situation with the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, right? He's currently embroiled in this controversy involving a criminal investigation by the DOJ. And it's, of course, stemming from his testimony to Congress. I believe it was last summer, June or July of last summer, regarding the central bank's $2.5 billion renovation project. And there's this big question about, Trump keeps highlighting it. He's saying, I could have done this job for $25 million. What's up with this? It's a relatively small building. It's the most expensive project in construction project in history. something's not right here. So we've got, and I believe it was just a few days ago, January 11th or 10th or something like that, where the DOJ served grand jury subpoenas on the Federal Reserve, threatening a criminal indictment against Powell related to that testimony. So there's that piece. And then, of course, we've got the explosion in precious metals, which has been the one of the main subjects that you've seen batted around on social media. Of course, people are really excited about that, and for good reason, not just simply because they're trying to make a buck, but also as silver prices continue to skyrocket, confidence in that's direct evidence that confidence in the fiat system, which has been eroding for years now, is finally beginning to manifest in a very big way, to such an extent that it was just reported the other day that the U.S. Mint has suspended the sale of all numismatic products because of this unprecedented demand and the fact that the price is moving so quickly, et cetera. So people around the world, they're waking up, and this is the good part. I think people are waking up to the debt prison, and they're seeking shelter in tangible assets. And I would probably argue that just about everybody listening, and certainly you and I, have seen this coming for a very long time, and therefore have made our investments. But this is a very strong indication, in my opinion, that we are very close to a breaking point, which, regardless of how it plays out, is undoubtedly going to usher in a new monetary system. And virtually everybody in our community agrees that we're going to end up back on the gold standard, in line with how our founders framed constitutional money. So we've got the Fed situation going on. We've got the precious metal price explosion. I mentioned a little bit earlier all of the waste, fraud, and abuse that was initially highlighted by DOJ, compounded by the recent expose done by Nick Shirley that preceded the events that we previously discussed in Minnesota, prompting this, inciting this tax revolt narrative. It's being amplified by high-profile people. And this is happening right alongside, I actually talked about this with Mike King, I think it was a couple weeks ago. The New York Times put out a piece reporting on the dysfunction within the IRS, essentially telling everybody that they're being run by a skeleton crew that's incapable of performing audits. So there's a lot of different components to what's happening right now. I know you wanted to make some specific comments about silver and I guess the attitude of a lot of individuals out there surrounding personal wealth. But I also want to hear your commentary on the broader financial picture.
Yeah.
Your take what's happening with the Fed, the IRS, precious metals, and what does it signify?
Hello, the dog's scratching. Hang on. Enough. Okay. Okay, just like the nations were corporate entities which could be taken over, hostile takeover, let's use business parlance, right? So was the Fed. Everyone's known that for the longest time. It's as federal as Federal Express. We know that's nothing new, although there are some that probably is new to them. And so the Fed was independent of the government, and but Trump is behaving like he owns it. Now, why would he be behaving like he owns it? Maybe he does. That's the point.
He does.
He took control. He took control of that for a long time ago. But again, it's the slow rollout of the news to slowly watch the Fed getting a bit of a backhander. And in Trump's inimitable style, I could have done it for a whole lot less. Your Fed Taj Mahal's ridiculous. It's a nonsense complaint, but the purpose of that is to start to get through that social proof that, oh, the president said something nasty about the Fed. Oh, that's excellent. That's new. So he starts off with the Taj Mahal comments, and then he starts slapping them on more substantive issues. So again, he eases the process, but that's because we know he can do it. Then you've got the IRS. The IRS. And this is exactly what people should be doing. I mean, the idea to stop paying tax has been out there forever, but why does it have currency now? Pardon the pun. Why does it have currency now? Because this is exactly what DJT needs everybody to do. This is a collective effort to defy tyranny. No, we're not paying. Now, a lot of us are known for many, many years that tax is voluntary in the US. A lot of people don't know that. A whole lot more don't know it. And they're concerned, and rightly so, that if they do the wrong thing, an audit will come in and their life is now over. But the fact that there aren't enough people to do the audit, big advertisement to everybody in the US, now is the time to collectively stand together, to bind yourselves together as a group, regardless of what your individual challenges might be. And this is reminiscent of the American War of Independence, where Benjamin Franklin drew the snake and each of the 13 colonies, and he said, and the snake was broken up into pieces, join or die.
No die.
And so the colonies that were, yeah, you know the one. And so the colonies were violently independent, but on this issue, they agreed to join together. So this is a replay of that moment in American history where as many individuals as possible, as many organizations as possible, get the word out. Everybody in the US, if you represent yourself or you represent an organization of thousands, put it out there. We refuse to pay tax, bring it to a grinding halt, and they can't do a thing about it. This is the evidence that DJT needs and the white hat needs in the minds of the rest of the population, that we can do this. We, the American people, can do it. I said some time ago that Donald Trump trusts the American people to save America, and he does. He's giving you now the opportunity to step up and have a second tax revolt and just refuse to pay. And watch what happens. Nothing happens to you. And as the German administrator and philosopher and writer Wolfgang von Goethe said, there's this invisible line that you are terrified to cross. But once you cross and you realize you've survived, there is a power that courses through your veins that you haven't felt before. You are now free, and you've done it once, and you'll do it a second, third, fourth, fifth time. It's extraordinary. Once you know you can do it. And I know I've been there on a personal and a professional level. It's like you put your foot out and it's pitch black and you're going to lean forward and you hope to God there's something solid for you to put your feet on, and you put your foot down and you're there and you cross that line. And once you're on the other side of that line, you look back at the other guy and say, get over here, it's great. And they're all shivering at the edge of this line, terrified to cross the line. Ladies and gentlemen of the United States, at the risk of giving you advice you don't need to hear from a foul-mouthed Australian, this is your moment. This is what you can do right now. This is what's got to happen. This is, the question is, what do we do? This is it. What can we do? This is it. Bring it down. Collapse the fiat currency. Stand up as your forebears did 200 and almost 50 years ago. Stand up and say, no. That's all you need to do. Think about it. What are the other evidence that this is the time to do it? Since when did the government give money back to the people? Here's $2,000. That's your dividend for being part of the US. Insurance, I'll tell you what, let's not give it to the insurance companies. Let's give it straight to the people. Buy your own insurance. When did any government, anytime, anywhere do that? Think about it. So the time is now, ladies and gentlemen. Get out there, do it. Spread the word. Don't pay tax. Find out the right way to do it, but just make sure you do it. And watch all of this cascade into an extraordinary series of successes. This is the time to do it. Last point on finances. Silver ounce. This is a particular one. There you go. Look at that. And there's the man himself on the coin. Now, when we acquired this, it wasn't very much. It was, I can't even remember what it was worth. And now in Australian dollars, at least 130 Australian, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't talk finances often. All I do is this. I say, and let me tell you what I've said for years, and I'll drop it, because people that are spending their time worrying about this stuff have missed the point of this entire exercise. Let me explain. What I do say about silver is this. We were told, what's this, 2026, so 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe, I can't even remember, that silver will reach parity with gold and then exceeded by a factor of 3 to 4. And we went, good, suits me, it's hold and buy time. And so we have, and we were buying it, $30 odd and then $40. And when it hit 50, my wife said, I don't know if we can afford this. And I said, well, if it's going to reach parity with gold, we're going to be grateful for buying at 50. You're going to be grateful for buying at 60, 70, 80, 90. You're going to be grateful to buy it at 200. Why? Because it's going to take off like a rocket. That's just that's not financial advice. That's what we believe to be true. It's worked for us thus far. Mm-hmm. Now, what's happening? You've got massive demand for silver by industry, particularly with the servers that are required for AI and all this, the kilo of silver, that's the couple of pounds of silver that's in each Tesla, the about the same weight in every high-tech missile gets launched into some bad guy's ship, for example. There's massive demand. So that's point number one. Point number two, China has decided not to export. They process 80% of the world's silver. They're not exporting anymore. The COMEX, the organization that trades silver, they're not getting any. Why? Because people are buying and holding. So literally the number of ounces of silver available for trading is nosediving. People are hanging on tight.
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean? That this is unprecedented in metals history. Not the fact that silver might outvalue gold. It used to in the old days. In the United States, silver was more valuable than gold. It just was. But here's the point. I hear people speak for hours and hours and hours on no end of discussion about silver. Why? Because they want to secure their financial future. Okay, got it. That's a very sensible thing to do. But once you've discovered what you're going to do, then just get on and do it and shut the hell up. Because if you spend every minute of every day listening to people talk about silver, first of all, even the world's experts on silver have no clue what's happening because this is unprecedented in their experience. They have had a hammer, and every metal problem they saw was a nail. Well, guess what? There's no more nails out there. They're all screws, and it's not going to work. So as educated and informed they are about silver and its history, you're in uncharted territory, and I mean it. So why waste your time listening to these people when they don't know what they're talking about? Next point. If this is more important to you than everything else, every other issue out there, then congratulations, the cabal has won you over. You've fallen for the trap. You are focused on this thing instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to buy a coin a week because that's what I can afford, or whatever the hell you do, then do it and forget about it. Because is this thing more important than children being raped? Is this thing more important than children being tortured and then have their blood drained and adrenochromosed? Is this thing more important than the child sex trafficking? Is this thing more important than to fill in the blank?
Everything
completely.
Yeah.
Nothing matters. Yes, get your silver, great. Put it to one side, shut the hell up, let it go, buy and hold, and get on with actually what you got to do. And what do you have to do? Well, an easy one is, as I said, don't pay your tax in a practical sense, but in a more important sense, the more enduring step we must all take. And if I sound like a broken record, I don't care. Become a moral person. Start living a moral life.
Amen.
This is how we save our countries.
Yep.
Become a moral person. All day, every day. I don't mean when you go to church. No, that's not when you're supposed to be moral. But I put $10 in the tray. Oh, well done. No. Every moment of every day, you live your life like Christ. We had our savior. We don't need another one. DJT knows he's not the savior. He's just doing a job that nobody else can do. Become a moral person. Live a moral life. Understand that every person you see out there is equal in the sight of God. You're no better. You're no worse. If you have gifts and skills, then use them to the advantage of your brothers and sisters out there. Am I my brother's keeper? Damn right you are. So do we need money? Yeah, of course we need money. But it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. So get your strategy, get on with it, and for the love of God, for the love of humankind, become a moral person.
Yep.
Every day, every day, every day. 2, become a sovereign person. And then now I'm going to start rattling my A1 end state. Moral, sovereign, self-reliant, Christian Western constitutional republic, economically powerful, militarily intimidating, politically free, culturally vibrant, socially cohesive. As individuals, as we show our Australia One people, we have to live that as individuals, and then collectively we can save the country. But the first step, thank you, yeah, on point, God first, absolute first, God first, God first. Once you've got that integrated into your life, everything becomes clearer, not easier, clearer. It's a bit like Valentine's Day. You know, that's 14th of February. Let's be nice to the wife. Every day should be Valentine's Day. If you're not getting enough sex, man, that's because every day's not Valentine's Day. You get my drift. Oh, and ladies, by the way, men signed up for monogamy, not celibacy. So, you know, fair's fair. But the point's this. The point is this. Every day is God's day. every day is God's day. Life isn't easier, but it's so much better. And that's what we've got to do. Folks, that's how we're going to save Australia. It's how you're going to save the US. That's how we save the planet.
Absolutely brilliant. And once again, I couldn't agree more. It really is about making, I mean, everything that we talked about tonight, those are the primary issues. And indeed, there's nothing wrong with, like you said, wanting to secure your financial future. It makes perfect sense, logical sense, but it can't cloud your consciousness to the point where you're forgetting what this operation is really all about. And you just absolutely nailed it. I don't think I even need to add anything to it. And, you know, what you were talking about a little bit earlier, just in terms of, you know, the tax revolt and people rising up and finally crossing that line, it actually brought me back to the episode that you did. I know I've mentioned it multiple times with, I believe it was with Jan Halper Hayes, where you talked about the hero's journey. And that was actually,
Yeah.
I mean, I was so moved by that. As you know, I did a whole podcast talking about it. And then very shortly after, I reached out to you and you agreed to come on. And it was the beginning of an amazing friendship and collaborative situation between the two of us that we continue to build upon. But that is ultimately, I think, the final step. You know, what you describe, you know, when you're facing that fear, like you're looking down into the abyss and you're thinking to yourself, my God, I don't know, I'm afraid to take this step. And when you finally do, everything changes at that point. So it's like the final leg of the hero's journey that brings you across that finish line. And after you cross that invisible line and you realize that there's really nothing to be afraid of, the only thing to fear is fear itself, as we know. Absolutely brilliant point. So, Rick, this has been an amazing conversation. We're at about 2.5 hours right now. So as you know, I could talk to you all day and all night, but we should probably start to wind this down a little bit here. We're getting absolutely incredible reactions from the audience. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I've done the best I can to try to highlight as many of the comments without being too distracting here as we're going on back and forth with our conversation. But this has been amazing. So hopefully, Rick, you enjoyed it as much as I did. And indeed, we're going to set one up for the not too distant future. I'd like to have you on once a month, bare minimum. So in closing tonight, as I typically do, I defer to you to offer the audience some words of wisdom. And we painted a pretty comprehensive picture of where we're at right now in terms of the Q operation, in terms of the Great Awakening, in terms of our priorities and our consciousness and moving to that next level. But as we embrace where we're at right now and we brace ourselves for what's to come, what words of wisdom, in addition to what you've already offered tonight, can you leave us with, and specifically for the folks out there in the audience, to help them to stay grounded as we get into the eye of the storm? Because I think both of us would agree it's going to get a lot more turbulent before the clouds finally disappear and we realize finally that we're in the midst of this golden age. So what do you want to leave us with tonight?
Let me just share with you, if I can, a slide that I played last Wednesday to my Australian audience as part of my weekly green room. And I was talking about the advantages of a constitutional republic. And the question is, who is supporting us? So if you can I've just shared screen. If you can bring that up, please, Patriot, and I'll take you through these inspiring words.
You're good to go.
Okay, we're good to go?
Yes, sir.
Right. And these words are from a gentleman called William Hutchinson Murray, 1913 to 1996, from his 1951 book entitled The Scottish Himalayan Expedition. And this is the beauty of reading, ladies and gentlemen. If you can read, you have the wisdom of the ages at your fingertips, and don't trust AI, for God's sake. But the question is, who's supporting us? Why am I quoting this gentleman? Because he and his friends were Scottish mountaineers, and they decided, let's climb the Himalayas. Huge task. And they realized, they looked at each other and said, well, they're great climbers, but they had never organized an expedition on the other side of the world in their lives. And they said, we should do it. And then they put down their deposit for the steamer to travel to Tibet. And then they realized they had done nothing else. And they said, we haven't done anything. And then Murray said, no, we've done everything. We've committed We've now committed to it, and now we're going forward. So in these next coming days, weeks, months, and years, you're going to have many ideas of things that need to be done, whether it's personal, professional, individual, or collective, makes no difference. And this is just an extraordinarily exciting observation by Murray in his book. And if you're a mountain climber, it's a great book. If you're not, it's interesting. But this is the line that grabbed me. And there's so much to it. Let me read it to you. And just bear this in mind in the years to come. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from a decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. I have learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. It is the most insightful and powerful statement about how we should front load our minds in the coming days, weeks, months, and years when leadership, real leadership, not appointed leadership, but real leadership that comes from here, is required from every individual on the planet. And so if you have that idea, just begin it. Because, and I'm living proof of this. I had crazy ideas of what I wanted to do. And as I stepped forward into the darkness, not knowing whether there was solid ground underneath or not, in many endeavors, not just this one, but in many endeavors throughout my life, just start. And then things start to appear. Phone calls, donations, alliances, friends, assistance, and you find yourself rolling forward. It is just the most brilliant moment. So please remember this. Remember this slide. Print it out. Stick it on. Take a screenshot. Stick it on your wall, and remember it. It is very real. Providence will move the moment you decide to move. That's it. Thanks, mate.
I'll tell you that is one heck of a way to end the show. And boy, can I relate to that, because and I know I've said this before to my audience many times, but never in my wildest dreams did I imagine, when I decided I was going to pick up the microphone for the first time and put my voice out there, that anything was going to even happen, that anyone was even going to listen. And from the moment I did that, it's exactly as you described. God started to move. The minute I made that decision, the minute I overcame that fear and I committed myself and I said, you know what, I'm going to do this because I feel a divine prompting. It's definitely not coming from me. There's definitely a force that's guiding me. Once I made that decision, my entire life began to take shape. My sense of purpose began to solidify. Everything that I had experienced in the past that felt like a failure started to seem more like preparation. And it's so true. My goodness, the words of wisdom that you just shared with us are so spot on. Just so for everybody out there listening tonight, I mean, take it to heart, because quite honestly, Rick is spot on with everything that he says, but particularly with this point. Once you make that decision, and this is really what the Great Awakening is all about, to commit yourself to a purpose that's greater than yourself, everything begins to change. And that's when God starts to really show up in your life. So I can't think of a better way to end this amazing podcast. Hopefully you folks really enjoyed it. I did have one rant from Southern, a $5 rant. Our children need to be set free of these wicked people. Amen. Absolutely. And that's what this is all about. So I just want to thank everybody out there for listening. Please do, if you have not already, hit that thumbs up button. If you're watching on X, that would be the heart button. It really does help boost the show and get it to a wider audience. And quite honestly, I think this content is something that everybody out there really would benefit from hearing. So thank you, Rick, so much. We'll be in touch for sure. I want to set something up for February. And I just want to thank everybody out there for listening, for this incredible audience, for all of your support throughout this entire process. And we're going to be back with you folks real soon. I'm going to be doing a show with Joe and Scott from Truth Stream, my good buddies, on Saturday. And of course, I'll be back with Mike King. Last week, Mike was a little bit under the weather, so we actually did a rerun of his podcast that we did. I think it was about a year ago. On he calls it The Divine Selfie. It was the book that he did on the Shroud of Turin, which was absolutely amazing. But I'm looking forward to getting back in the saddle with Mike on Monday. And then let's see, next week I should be doing a show with Dave, and I are going to get back on our normal schedule. We missed a week. It's Dave from News Treason. And a little bit later in the month, I've got SG Anon coming back. I'm really excited about that. I haven't spoken to SG in quite some time. So a lot of good content coming your way, folks. But we'll be back, and we really, truly appreciate everybody out there for listening. God bless. Godspeed, everybody. Patriot out.